tiny people and we play with them. Ooh, ooh. We paint tiny people and we play with them.
Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Miniatures Monthly at the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston and joining me as ever is Tom Senior.
Hello, good evening.
On this, the middle of March. So we did do a podcast in a different month to the last one.
Yeah, are we technically on track? No. We're late. Let's not pretend.
But it is technically monthly in the sense that it happens in a month.
Okay, we've done it.
Yeah.
Good job, us.
The actual distance between months, no one can know.
Yeah.
Impossible to tell.
No way.
And we shouldn't be asked to try. It's been a busy month though. Not for us.
No, luckily the World of Warhammer has doubled its speed to, counter our lack of activity.
It's a bit much in a way.
Yeah, I think I've struggled to keep pace with it at all this month actually, just because I've been busy partly, but also just because there's lots of tiny, relatively small announcements it feels like for lots of bits of games. Well, apart from a new 40k core box obviously, but yeah, loads to discuss.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think I was curious to figure out I know that obviously Games Workshop puts targets on themselves to sort of match sort of sales week on week, year on year. So this particular week in March is expected to do better than the same week in March last year.
Yeah.
And so my question was for a long time was like, how are they going to handle a year without an edition change? They had we had 40k 8th 2 years ago, and then that's a bizarre number of years that is.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Anyway, sorry, I just realized how long ago that was.
And AOS 2 last year.
So,
yeah.
So in addition to time speeding up, which is horrifying, this is obviously a year without a big change for either of the main game systems. And apparently the way to compensate with that, for that is to simply just unleash a ridiculous kind of cavalcade of stuff. All of the time, which makes it difficult to not, and we'll probably get to this, just wildly adopt new projects for almost on if nothing other than a passing whim.
That's what they want, though. That's
it is. Yeah,
intention.
Yeah, it's whale song is what you're getting from me this week. So we've got a bunch of news to talk through, so we should talk through it. I think unlike previous news sections, because there's a whole bunch, we might just split it into 40k and AOS separately rather than trying to do things in the order that they happened. Because no one remembers what order things happened in.
Doesn't matter.
Also, there is a games event on at the moment that a bunch of news is coming out of. We have some of that news, but not all of it. So by the time you listen to this, there will be more of it. Yeah. But I don't know what it is because it hasn't happened.
No matter when we record, there's always something that gets announced quite large.
Actually,
we do it.
It's kind of comforting in a way to know that is literally happening right now.
Yes.
So I don't need to worry about it might happen because it will. By the time we finish recording this, there'll be something announced. I don't know, laser elves or I don't know, Angron's back and he's just a big anus now. I don't know. Anything could happen in the
very true.
Grim darkness of the far
I hope
future.
that doesn't happen.
Me too.
It'd be awful.
It would. But who knows? So we should talk about 40k, I think probably first, because, a big man is back again.
Yeah. I'm a very big fan of this model. I've got to say.
Me too.
It's a good classic. It's a classic. It's a good and nice. Abaddon has returned and he's been
bigger than ever.
He's been eating his beans, drinking his milk.
He doesn't accept the blessings of the Chaos Gods, but he will eat some beans.
He's going to get stacked. He's down in his raw egg yolks, like Rocky, and he's in massive now. Not quite as big as Guilliman, I don't think.
He's close.
But close. And I think that's the way it should be. I like the idea that he's slightly smaller and sort of punching up a little bit, as a kid.
I mean, he was punching up a lot further up previously. So
yeah, that's true.
I think someone on Discord pointed out that old Abaddon basically fits in new Abaddon's upturned hand.
I've seen the photoshops of that and they're very rewarding.
Yeah. I think it's an amazing model.
It's superb. It really is. And the option, not just the pose is just incredible and it's kind of imperious, but I also love the fact that they include 3 different heads, whether you want friendly, Abaddon you can relate to and, maybe, have a chat with, and a slightly noble kind of Horus style facade. And then there's just the raging, furious Abaddon.
Yeah. Your options are Handsome Horus.
Yes.
Angry Abaddon. Or Bane.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know which one I prefer. I don't know. I like the noble one, actually. And I also quite like the mask one. just because it fits it so well with his armor and, how...
Yeah, cape or no cape for you, Tom?
Oh, I do like the cape. I like the sweeping sense of, with his gesture, the cape kind of sweeps behind him, and I think it's a very good profile. And also, I like the fact that it would differentiate him from Guilliman a bit, because Guilliman's he's capeless, isn't he? He's just the kind of Space Marine silhouette. But I like the idea of that extra chaotic adornment, and the idea he's got this kind of spikes coming out the top, and that's part of the, what Chaos Space Marines do to themselves to separate themselves from their old
It's
brothers.
what happens is, you fall to, or you embrace the need to overthrow the false emperor, and you also learn to accessorize at the same time. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, and there's the armor trim on it is just perfect. And all the kind of, I really like we'll move on to the new box set, but I love the Chaos Space Marines and what they've done with the Chaos much more than what they've done with the Primaris.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's worth getting onto. So the new box is called Shadow Spear, which is not to be confused with Spear of Shadows, a book, which is sort of every army box they've put out recently has been leading to this, I think, because it's all been battles taking place between different factions on Vigilus, which is the new world everyone is fighting over all the time.
The new Cadia, basically.
Yeah, Cadia 2. Mm-hmm. 2 Blackstone, 2 Fortress. I don't know what the joke would be. But basically it's Black Legion, it's Returned Black Legion, Chaos Space Marines, led by a floaty goat man, versus, literally, I was going to say a new chamber of Ultramarines.
Basically though.
But they're literally called the Vanguard. So it's presumably the next one will be, Sacrosanct Ultramarines.
And then Exterminatus.
Extremis,
Yeah, you can see where they're going with it. I'm not quite sure where the Space Marines aesthetic is at the moment, though, in terms of the Primaris. I've absolutely loved the Tactical Marines. They're Intercessors. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
The equivalent of Tactical Marines, almost, in a way. I love the posing of them and the way they redesigned the armor to match more sensible human proportions. I think it just completely worked for me. But the new stuff feels a little bit weird, and I'm not quite sure whether it kind of feels trapped between recognizably modern military and far future Space Marine shapes in a way that I don't quite get it.
I would say, and I know I tend to like everything really. Like these are the first, the Space Marines in that box are the first new Games Workshop models I think I don't like, as a range, right? Like rather than being like, oh, I'm not sure about this particular one, but I love this unit or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm really not sure about them. And I think it's because they combine, I think the cleanness of, the Space Marine look and the Reaver look. And I don't mind the kind of stripped back power armor thing, but then they add loads and loads and loads of additional accessories, in what feels like quite a sort of, it's quite 90s. Like Games Workshop have gone in quite an 80s direction lately, I think, in a bunch of ways. Like there's a lot of sort of G-Steel Occults, like throwback kind of 80s comic book things. They feel very Rob Liefeld.
Right.
Like they're just absolutely fucking covered in pouches and bandoliers and stuff. And the sort of, you're kind of like, I think with the average Space Marine design, you accept that there's a bunch of stuff you don't see, right? Like they're holding weapons with, clips, bolter magazines and they're not covered in bolter magazines, right? In order to carry enough.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of mind's eye stuff you just accept, right? Whereas with these, they're all wearing like a little half cape bit of tarp, like urban combat tarp. And they've got like this sort of like, tactical vest kind of stuff. I think the worst offender is the new lieutenant. Jokes about constant Primaris lieutenants notwithstanding.
Yeah.
Because he's got like power armor, a gun with 3 different scopes on it, a visor with its own scope and a visor. He's holding a knife, but he's also got another knife and a keychain that looks like a knife and a keychain that looks like a bullet, which I think are the marks of, honor or something like that. But it's a bit much. And I don't really get like, the thing I really like about the Intercessors is, I think we've spoken about this when we first saw them, the vibe that they're sort of slick and calmly kind of, they feel quite modern, but without being sort of over adorned.
Yeah. Whereas
these, I think, are just full on over adorned.
Yeah, but in a direction I'm not terribly interested in for Space Marines. So if they were full on in a direction of, holy warriors with a kind of paladin-esque reverence for the Emperor and their mission, a la Blood Angels and a lot of other kind of chapters, or even, like the Dark Angels and the way they're robed.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of, a very Call of Duty style tactical military look combined with the familiar Space Marine armor. It's never sit right for me. And it's silly to criticize the Space Marines wearing capes, because I love it when the Dark Angels wear capes. It's part of their whole deal and their psychology.
Yeah.
But the Scouts wearing capes, I know they're camo, but they're just like ghillie suits for them basically. But in Space Marine armor, it just feels super odd to me. I don't know why even.
I think it's because I appreciate this is the Raven Guard's entire thing, but it's like it's the sort of the folly of attempting to be a sneaky 1-ton man.
Right.
It's like,
yeah.
I think maybe for me it's it's a load of extra detail that doesn't actually necessarily add lots more character.
Right.
Whereas there are, there's lots of detail added to Space Marine, miniatures from particular chapters, for example, like Space Wolves with lots of pelts or like you say, Dark Angels with the robes. Like you can absolutely do that. And I think it works because the core design is really strong. But this stuff doesn't add loads to me. And I think, actually, to be honest, although I was trying to think about it, if they just said, these are Raven Guard models, this is what Raven Guard do, because it's what their thing is like stealth and infiltration, then obviously I don't think they'd ever do that, because they would never want to limit the, availability of those models to other people. But if adding lots of tactical gear was part of the Raven Guard upgrade sprue or something, I'd kind of buy it, because it would have a more obvious kind of grounding in character or personality. But because this is just sort of I guess we need all of this extra stuff, I don't quite get a vibe from it, really.
Yeah. And also, because, they're always traditionally painted as Ultramarines, and the Ultramarines are still very much the kind of poster chapter.
Yeah.
But the Ultramarines fantasy is about tactical brilliance and kind of quite, codex heavy, reliable.
Yeah.
And that, it's hard to extrapolate that into detail on models. Perhaps maybe it does look like that. Maybe it does just look like extra gubbins, like military gubbins, to make you better at the executing strategy stuff. I don't know.
Maybe. I think there's also there's a sort of tremendous kind of Roman military thing to the Ultramarines, where it's all sort of it's quite, when I say Spartan, I don't mean literally Greek Spartans, but sort of disciplined and kind of stripped back. Whereas, the sort of the idea of, I guess they would work better as other chapters. I think they'd work quite well as, Blood Ravens, for example, the sort of more kind of out there chapters that do things their own way, rather than Ultramarines, right?
Yeah,
where I can kind of imagine them. Yeah. Although I suppose the idea is, Gilliman's back and he's rewritten the codex.
Yeah.
And it's, it's Call of Duty now. You can unlocks. It's just unlocks for days.
Yeah, everyone's prestiging out there. Then you've got these two flying guys with enormous guns that are, even for Warhammer, way too big for them, and they look totally out of control as they're about to just crash right into the ground. And I was like, wow. Again, I've just seen photographs. Sometimes when you see models, they come across very differently. But I was like, not really. I quite liked the original idea of these Space Marines that come down from space, and they're enormous in this Gravis armor, and they've got a storm bolter on each fist, and that was a cool fantasy, and I can imagine that, and it's very well described in the books. Whereas these guys just look spindly, out of control, look sort of like a goblin characters almost.
Yeah, right.
Doom
it's
divers.
They're holding this giant rivet gun, and it's as you say, way too big for them, and because they are, it would be one thing if they were in huge armor and firmly planted, because they're like Terminator weapons. They look like sort of Terminator autocannons kind of thing.
Yeah.
And was it, it's not aggressors, it was, Inceptors. Yes, Inceptors.
They're the original ones, yeah.
Were flying Terminators basically with Terminator weapons in each hand. And it kind of worked because they were quite punchy looking, whereas these look, like a kind of like they would fly away like a pop balloon as soon as they fire it.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good description. Yeah. So that side of things just didn't quite sit for me. But the other side of stuff, I love the new Demon Engine thing that they've made that looks like a Dark Mechanicus thing gone even more horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And they've got their kind of, not quite dreadnoughts, but almost like
Blitzracers.
that are kind of just disgusting enough to kind of work, and they fit into that aesthetic. But I really particularly like just the normal Marines, which they have. I think they've increased in size, but they've got all the kind of all the adornments you'd expect of a.
Yeah, I think they feel less surprising because obviously Blackstone gave us a sense of where that was all going to go.
That's true, yeah.
But they are great. The new Black Legion stuff is really, really cool.
Yeah, super nice. And it's again another example of a box set, basically prefacing what's going to come in the next year or so. So you'd expect to see a lot of Blackstone stuff, like the Silver Tower turning up in 40k in the next sort of few years, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Including maybe an Amble army. You can run the Amble, I think. I think they come
can,
with rules, in 40k. So I don't know what its allegiances are.
I think none. I don't
Right.
know, because I've got the Amble model, and it does come with the War Scrolls, and its allegiance is Amble, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like, one other thing about Shadow Spear is a box. So there's a few things. One is obviously it's, the price has gone up for those kinds of army boxes. So 105 quid, which is,
extra 10 quid or something.
which is, it's an interesting one because it has fewer models than Dark Imperium, and it doesn't have the book.
The book's amazing in the
book's
Dark Imperium
a big
as well.
part of it. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm a bit, the other side of it is, I think, it's been interesting to note over the last couple of years, particularly with, the sort of, I guess, what can feel like the core boxes, how the kind of, the sort of, the paint challenge works out between them. And I think it's varied over time. So like the original AOS core set, the corn stuff was vastly more sort of labor intensive to paint through than the Stormcast. Really, like obviously you can always do more, but Stormcast look good with a few, the Stormcast are I would say like a low floor, high ceiling army.
Yeah, I'd say that actually it's very hard to get to that high ceiling with them because their sculpts are so basic in many ways. But yeah, you're completely right about the core being much harder to paint. They're smaller as well in that set.
Yeah, and there's more of them and they're more detailed. And like, and I think, Dark Imperium was a relatively balanced box in that regard because Space Marines, can be forgiving in that flat colors can just do it for you and you're fine. But they can also be difficult because clean panel lining and things is a pain.
Yeah.
And then the Death Guard, again, really high skill ceiling. You see a lot of really, really good painters doing Death Guard, but at the same time, quite a low floor because they're just scribbly, monster men, and you spray them green and put Agrex Earthshade over them and they're most of the way done.
Yeah.
And then I think, Soul Wars, the new AOS box, is like one of the best balances of that because like Nighthaunt can be super easy, can also reward more work. And the Sacrosanct are Stormcast, so they benefit from the same thing, but with a little bit more on them.
Yeah, just a bit more for you to do.
Yeah, not loads and loads, but like robes and a bit more sort of, there's more opportunities to, if you want to do heraldry or something, you can.
For sure.
Whereas Shadow Spear, I think is really interesting because like, that was like one of the first ones I looked at and went like, fuck, I don't want to. Like, I mean, I appreciate you don't have to do Black Legion, for example, but like, if you're a new person looking at that at the box, you've got black power armor, which is difficult.
Yeah.
Covered in gold filigree and chaos stuff, which is also difficult. And then on the other side, you've got Space Marines, which would traditionally be, relatively easy to a certain, amount of finesse you could put on them, but absolutely covered in detail, in dynamic poses. That means that, like, I don't know, a spray of blue spray paint and doing the shoulder pad trims and the lenses and the gun absolutely won't do it because they'll be covered in, other stuff that you've ignored.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'll be interested to see if that affects how the adoption rate of it, if you know what I mean, because it just feels intimidating to me. Like I was sort of looking at both sides of it thinking like either one of these halves of this box feel like quite a big thing to take on.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. It feels a little bit imbalanced to me that it feels like you get more chaos for that, in that box as well, given that you have a vehicle and you've got a couple of big lads, and then you've also got rank and file and a general. Like that's a really nice army. Whereas on the other side, you've got a couple of flying dudes and some just rank and file, and then a
snipers
and some snipers, and it feels like less of a interesting army to use. Maybe.
I think maybe it's a weird, like if you think of it in terms of like boxes you end up buying separately. The Space Marine make up for the lack of a vehicle with more characters because they get a librarian and a captain and but like I was surprised, like when they were sort of first teasing it, I was talking to a friend in GW in town and said like I was half expecting like there to be some bikes or like a land speeder equivalent because they seem like things that would fit really naturally into the sort of Vanguard Primaris.
Yeah, right.
Because I was kind of trying to figure out like, what do you put in the box is the equivalent to the spindly demon engine thing. And there just isn't anything really equivalent to it.
No.
Yeah.
You've got to go so big with like the transport is a really cool model, but like that's a big thing. Like you probably don't get that type of thing in a box. They don't have any kind of mid-sized, the equivalent would be like a dreadnought or something like that, but there isn't really and the Primaris dreadnought is massive. Yeah, so again, it probably doesn't fit in that type of box. So I think the Primaris have always outgrown their own boxes in a way for that scale of model.
They're too big.
They're just too big.
The boys are getting too big.
They're too big for their own boxes. Whereas Chaos, I still aren't. Like, and also more free with Chaos to do strange demon engines, whereas, Space Marines kind of have to be boxy and, you know, larger in that regard.
Yeah. I'm sort of reminded of the, I think it was the 3rd edition 40k box set, the, Black Templars versus Dark Eldar one that I think had a land speeder in it, and like, you know, as well as like 2 squads of tactical marines and a man, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So it's like, I think that you could do that, but you'd probably lose one of the other squads or something. Like, I don't know. It's just, yeah.
I think you get a more interesting game out of it. I think the problem with the Dark Imperium box, was that, the Nurgle force you got, apart from the Blight Drone, did one thing very slowly, and then the Primaris on the other side did their own one thing very slowly in very stationary manner. Like the Primaris just stand still around their buff characters, and the Nurgle just walk forward quite slowly, the Death Guard even. And so there was very little kind of tactical variety to what you could do in the game with just the starter set. And at least with the Demon Engine, and at least with some of their flying stuff the Space Marines have in the new box, they might lend itself.
Yeah, they've got like deployment madness as well with the Vanguard, because they basically set up wherever they want.
So like kind of infiltrators. Yeah, that's nice. So it might actually end up in better games.
Yeah, I could totally buy that. Like I quite like the rules for the Vanguard Primaris. I kind of like, but yeah, I think with those models, I can't wait to see what they do with the actual multi-pose kits that will inevitably come out for both sides, actually, because I think, you know, for the criticism I've leveled at it, I think I might just not like these monopose versions.
Yeah, you might be able to leave a lot of that detail off or position it in a way that makes more sense to
or even, you know, convert them a little bit more easily without compromising the joins obviously like they were designed to be, you know, I think they're push fit, you know, there's a lot of other things going on there.
Cool.
Yeah. So I think we've that's probably the most negative we've ever been about a big box, but
yeah.
But Abaddon's incredible, so it's like
Abaddon's wonderful.
It is.
Oh, you just buy Abaddon as a one-off painting project, wouldn't you? Just to have that model. That's tempting.
Yeah, I do like him very, very much. So otherwise, there's been a bunch of stuff revealed for Blackstone, which you and I still need to play.
Yeah.
Because I played a little bit more of it. I'm still really, really loving it. So this is a really weird one. So they've announced like a standalone game called Combat Arena, which is a sort of 4-player like arena combat game. But that set as a prequel to Blackstone Fortress, where all of the characters very evidently are new Blackstone Fortress heroes, including like an inquisitorial knight who looks rad, an amazing looking rogue trader, servitor and stuff. But the weird thing about this is, and I can't take credit for this observation, but based on the cards that you can see in the photo they put out of the game and the way it's laid out, it's Gore Chosen, which was an Age of Sigmar Khorne themed standalone arena combat game that was notable chiefly for being a 35 quid game that came with about 70 quid worth of character models.
Yeah, right.
And that, so I'm guessing this is just them finding a home for a rule set that is no longer sold, but it's an interesting sort of weird, like mashing together of things.
Yeah, right. It's interesting. I mean, they've released hero boxes before with just heroes in for something like the old Warhammer Silver Tower, Warhammer Quest games. But I don't. So are we hoping that these are Blackstone Fortress characters in waiting?
I think they are. Like, I think they've basically said that.
Yeah.
It's just like my confusion is whether or not they will come in their own Blackstone Fortress expansion.
Yeah, in their own box, but with Blackstone Fortress cards or something, or is there a card expansion that lets you?
Yeah, or does this have them? In which case, that's a different proposition entirely. Like, it's a strange sort of thing because I really love the models. Actually, I it'd be great to have more hero options for Blackstone.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm not sure what I know that was revealed at New York Toy Fair, I think, where it's more like
board games centric, perhaps.
Board games facing.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. That makes sense in that case. But they don't tend to do kind of a blister pack with built-in rules. So they wouldn't do like an individual Blackstone hero with its rules for use in Blackstone. It feels like Games Workshop's strategy is built around boxes, which means you need a core game to sell the models around almost.
I suppose Underworld's Warbands are almost the exception to that, in that
true,
it's like one or two sprues and some cards and rules and things.
Yeah, that's really true.
But obviously, in some cases, that's like 7 or 8 models. But like, a Warband is like the unit of play for Underworld. So maybe they could do like, I don't know, 10, probably £15 mini boxes for Blackstone with a character and rules. Maybe.
Yeah. It's not how they've
Maybe.
tended to do things. I can imagine it being like 30 quid box with cards in.
Yeah.
In which case, like, why make it a sort of Gore Chosen reskin, if that's what it is, and not do it as a kind of Blackstone expansion as they have with, say for example, the Blackstone expansion with the, Ambolin was 35 quid, I think.
Yeah.
You've got like a big model and 2 small models with it, and then mostly cards and stuff. And the new one, I don't know how much it's going to be priced, but again, it's just like a big model and a small model, and it's probably going to be quite similar.
Yeah.
So why not continue doing that with just a couple of models at that price point rather than bundling 5 or 6 heroes into one? I don't know.
It'll be an interesting one because actually I think, the question of price for these things is kind of interesting because I feel like, Dreaded Amble is actually a really lovely model. Like I picked it up and the cards and rules and things are cool. Like it's a substantial little additional adventure.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Like it's really tuned for sort of end game, you know how to play this game kind of stuff. So I don't think it's like an auto buy necessarily. If that makes sense. It's not like your game is incomplete without this. It's more that, when you want more. But I think they also obviously know that, stuff like this, expansions for things like Warhammer Quest, are very much one-off purchases and very optional feeling.
Yeah.
So it feels like quite premium price for what you get. Cause the Amble is a big model, but it's slightly smaller than Mollog.
Right.
And Mollog's Mob, and I don't necessarily buy that the value of a box is literally how much plastic is in it.
Yeah, sure.
But Mollog's Mob is like quite a big model and 3 small models. Whereas for 17 quid with a bunch of cards and other bits and so on. Whereas, the Dreaded Amble is, about the same size as Mollog and 2 tiny models, and fewer cards and things for 35 quid for like twice the price.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's okay. That's more of an interesting sort of like, how how value weighting works across completely different ecosystems.
Yeah.
There's probably the assumption that, almost every serious Underworlds player buys every expansion because there are cards in every expansion that are usable by everybody. So therefore that and also maybe there's a precedent set by the pricing of other Underworlds warbands. So that's what that goes for.
Yeah.
Whereas, a Blackstone expansion is more like a one-off kind of thing. Like I wouldn't be surprised if a expansion with 4 or 5 new hero models and their accompanying cards was 50 quid. Like genuinely wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. The type of player has already sunk 90 quid into the core set, something like that. And if you're playing it enough to want an expansion, it's a regular part of your social game playing space, and you can therefore charge more to expand that than you could maybe something like Shadespire. It's just interesting, isn't it, to think about how these things, I would and plan to buy the Amble expansion. Even though I've not played the game yet, because I just know I love the models in the world.
It's a lovely model. And the game is great. It's still my favorite new thing games that we should have done. But yeah, it's just interesting. Like, so the new expansion they announced this afternoon actually was, Traitor Command, which is a Chaos Ogren and a Chaos Commissar, which are cool things to see.
Yeah.
They're really cool things, but I'm interested to see what the price point for that ends up being, though I would suspect it'd be 35 quid again.
I'd suspect so, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I guess these things, they, don't just come with rules for how the bad guys operate. There are quests and stuff, aren't they? With like rewards.
Yeah, they are like little, you'll get, I think you'd get at least one, like, dedicated session out of just playing the Amble stuff.
Yeah.
And then,
turn up cards.
And then obviously you can feed those cards into the encounter decks for the main game. If you want it to be,
hard.
really hard. Although a really nice thing that actually I think, balances the Amble in some ways, which is super cool, is the Amble treats every model as an explorer, which is
That's
ruling,
cool.
which means that it can kill anything.
Yeah, so you go after like...
Yeah, because I think that's, not to get deep into Blackstone stuff, but like, I think one of the only things it's kind of missing, and it's sort of like, or it'd be a very different game. But at the moment, everything's either an enemy or an explorer. And so, when you draw an encounter table, when you're drawing the encounters for a given combat map, and you get like, I don't know, traitor guard, ghouls, spindle drones, you are just fating all of those things. Whereas it would be kind of cool if there were factions.
Yeah.
Because it feels like there are factions.
In the fiction there are.
Yeah.
Like, the Urgles don't care about who they eat, right?
No, Urgles will eat anything. The spindle drones are the wardens of the fortress itself and will kill anything that's not part of the fortress. and the Traitor Guard of Chaos. So it would actually be kind of rad if there were rules for them fighting each other.
Yeah.
And you could strategize around that. Because I think you'd have to make combat a little bit harder to account for the fact that, but then you could get an encounter where you draw Traitor Guard, Beastmen, Chaos Marines.
They're all on the same side.
And they're all on the same side.
Yeah.
And, so that was something that I think is, the thing that's so good about Blackstone is how well its, mechanics create, its generation creates really interesting, like, scenarios where you have to pick which way to go because you've got these enemies this way and these enemies this way. And these guys are likely to behave in this way, and so they might run this way and that kind of thing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But it was missing that element of, like, almost like AI, essentially, or like, behaviors. And the Amble adds that because it means that he can show up, eat Obsidious Mallex and leave.
Yeah, and if you defeat him, he sort of goes away and comes back as well, doesn't he? But tunnels away and comes back, and it's like a nightmare.
Yeah,
quite
right.
get rid of it.
There's like, I don't want to spoil things for the expansion, but there are like tunnels you can crawl through, and you can't do anything but crawl while you're inside them, and like getting caught in there is like actually
nice.
like
That's
horror.
horrifying.
Yeah,
that's great. I love it. And they've got mechanical ambles in Necromunda now. Is that a thing? And the sort of armored ambles.
Ambots. Yeah.
I don't understand how that works in fiction terms, but I like the models, and it's cool that
I think they just made some robots inspired by everyone's favorite giant, like extremely hench ant.
So that there aren't actually giant ants inside those things.
No, they're not. They're like,
that makes more sense.
It's like, like in real life when you build a JCB that looks like a dog, because of course you do.
Yeah.
No,
But it's just nice. It's just
they
nice.
just did that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I don't know why I went with JCB that looks like a dog. I'm
Yeah,
sure
I don't know.
I'm sure there are examples
I
of
think it
machines
should
that look like
exist.
an animal, but
There are.
are there?
No.
No. There aren't actually.
Shame.
Get on it, John Deere.
Yeah, come on.
Where's your
Dyson?
Deere?
Where's your vacuum cleaner shaped like a mole?
Exactly.
Bring it.
We should talk about Age of Sigmar.
Yes. We should. A huge number of, there's 2 battle tomes. Is that right? If not more.
Two have come out, and a third one's been
Announced. So we've got Skaven now. We've got Moonclan, and
Moonclan was January.
that was before.
Yeah.
So Skaven,
Fleshy to Courts.
that's right. And then, Khorne, Blades of Khorne, the back.
So what you've done there, Tom, is describe 3 things I like.
Yeah, it feels like they're laser targeting your brain.
Yeah. I thought, I'm not going to lie, at the start of this year, I was like, you know what? And I said this on this podcast we record, so that's for posterity. You know what? I'm almost done with Siege, and I am almost done with Siege. It's time for a little bit of Slaves to Darkness, because Dark Earth will be coming in middle of the year, maybe. Probably.
Still plausible.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't happen, Tom, because
Yeah,
they won't
too many
stop
models.
releasing things I want.
Yeah.
And then they decided to update Khorne, which is cool. Like, I don't feel huge pressure to get in and play by the book. But also surprise Skaven Battle Tome. In fact, I think on the last pod, I said, I think they're going to do a Skaven Battle Tome. And it was like, maybe not. And then it was like Skaven and Fleshy to Courts on the same day.
Yeah.
And this is also after I had said that, because I'm doing AOS doubles with a friend with a Death Army in September, that I thought I would do a small Fleshy to Courts force to accompany his Nighthaunt.
Lo and behold.
And lo and behold,
There it is.
there it is. Especially at a time in my life where I suddenly found myself with a bunch of free time and a bit of disposable income. Anyway, Tom, I've fallen down a bit of a shame hole.
This doesn't entirely surprise me. It's only a matter of time.
It was, but still, I just want to, and I appreciate this is probably an accepting space for this kind of thing. But we can talk about the AOS news, but I can also give some thoughts on both of those books, because they are there on my shelf. So in terms of actual like news stuff, I think because it's been quite a 40k heavy thing, there hasn't been like lots of stuff announced. Because Carrion Empire was already announced last month, which is the army box, which is Skaven War Machines versus Fleshy to Courts Gribble Men.
Yep.
The Khorne book stuff looks neat. Sets a precedent for, the last Khorne book was 2 years ago, so it wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah, that's true.
Gives a precedent for the AOS 2ifying of, factions that maybe need a bit of help.
Yeah, stuff like Caradron desperately needs some help. I'd like to see that. I'd kind of like to see Sylvaneth, even though they're fun, just put a little bit of buff to the Sylvaneth, because they're beautiful models as well.
Yeah,
but it's rad to think that, so if you're collecting one of those armies, you're previous to this type of release, you're kind of in a pit of despair a little bit because you're looking ahead and thinking, well, maybe next edition I might get a book for my army 5 years down the line, but actually the cadence is going to be quicker than that by the looks of it. It looks like they're going to use books to keep on refreshing the ranges with just a couple of models in addition, just a scenery model, maybe a hero model, maybe a unit perhaps. And that's what an army refresh looks like now, rather than having to redo an entire range as it kind of historically used to be.
Once every 15 years.
Yeah, right. Which is quite welcome, really, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and the Khorne expansion is actually like, it's reasonably beefy, like it's, because they're putting out the Flesh Hounds separately.
Yeah.
Karanak, that were in Wrath and Rapture. They're releasing, 2 new Herald models, plastic, Bloodletter Heralds, one of which is Skulltaker, who's a named character. And I think that's it, but that like pretty much fills out the stuff that was previously resin or unavailable for whatever reason.
And they're also getting an altar, and they're also getting, I think they're getting some spells as well.
Yeah, Endless Prayers.
Endless Prayers, right,
Yeah,
nice.
Exactly.
Nice save, Khorne.
Exactly. It's not magic, shut up.
It's prayer. Good, whatever.
I'm not a wizard, go away. He is a wizard.
He's a wizard.
Yeah, so, the altar is a weird one. It looks a bit, it's a bit like a sort of, like a teleport pad to me. Like a sort of, I don't know, or like a kind of, small stage at like a folk festival from hell.
Yeah, that's what's weird about it. It's like, I was looking at it and I was like, well, this is cool and it's very Khorne. But, it's the idea that they sort of set it up before a pitched battle overnight, like a Glastonbury festival. They sort of put the pyramid stage or something.
Exactly.
And then, they do blood rituals off it. It's got a sort of hint of sort of Mayan blood sacrifice to it.
Yeah.
It's tiered, steps.
I do find this about like, so, I think, faction terrain is worth, I think it's an interesting subject to debate because, I can see both sides of the argument that there shouldn't be things that cost 0 points that give your army a benefit because, I mean, it functionally just adds to the basic cost of getting set up for an army. Like there is no reason not to have it. And that's something we should definitely talk about when we get to Flesh Eater Court because there's some, real big stuff that is like not, is like quadruply free if you're willing to spend money on a big chair.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it encourages people to buy terrain, which has never done particularly well, and to have terrain on tables and to play around terrain because terrain rules are interesting and, playing around terrain, like it's a big thing from my recent games of AOS. That,
yeah, same.
I think it's good for the game in that regard. It looks cool. I do wish in some ways they would make sure there were always a really solid reason why the terrain is there. Like, I don't mind if it's flimsy, but like, all this starts with Sylvaneth, summoning forests. And that's what they do. They create, the enchanted woodland, like, bursts out of the ground and the Sylvaneth emerge from it. I completely understand that. Similarly, like the Nurgle, Nulmore, like the Nurgle tree, again, Nurgle's garden is a existing conceit. It grows everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that as well. The Ideneth shipwreck, they explain in the Ideneth book that sort of ghostly manifestations of this kind of like magical ocean that the Ideneth bring with them manifest on the battlefield when the Ideneth fight.
Yeah.
When you have fish that are swimming through magic water, it's fine, I think, to have a ghostly shipwreck or something, particularly because the sort of default paint scheme makes it look like it's not really there. It's like a mirage or an illusion or something.
Spectral.
Yeah. The new Skaven Gnorholes, also work because they are literally like, holes rent in the ground because of the things Skaven have been able to do since the beginning of AOS, which is tunnel through reality. And they just add a game system for something that was already in the fiction, which was
100%.
Yeah. And they're rad as well in terms of what they do and how they work. And I think they're quite fun and strategic. But then you do have ones like the Khorne altar and I think the throne, like the charnel throne for the, and to an extent like the Herdstone and the, Loon shrine for the Grots, where it's like, before every battle, both sides are doing a certain amount of like, as you say, like Glastonbury style setting up. It's like, like every, like a Beast of Chaos versus Flesh Eater Courts game is fundamentally like an amp v amp. Like Battle of the Bands where like you got to go set up the night before and then reveal your big rock and shout at their big rock until one of you wins.
I can kind of imagine the Herdstone being carried by the sort of tribes of beastmen.
Yeah.
But there's something about the model that, implies that it's magical sort of floating a little bit as they might be able to move it. But the altar and those two altars basically are, overnight jobs almost.
Yeah.
And if they were kind of is it Palantirs, where the people carrying
Palanquins.
Palanquins, sorry.
Yeah.
Palantir is a world stone or something in
Yeah.
the Marvel universe. I can't remember. If there's something that looked like it could be carried or was being carried by Gribblies, or something like the Black Coach, which is kind of the equivalent for the Night Haunts, really. Even though it's a unit, it's basically a moving piece of scenery as well.
Yeah.
I think I'd buy it a bit more.
My idea was that the charnel throne, like, was supposed to be like the seat of a aberrant, arch regent or a ghoul king. They've sort of gone halfway with it, which it is a throne of bone sitting on top of a staircase, basically in the middle of nowhere.
Very good.
I think a fun version of that would just be to do like a big pile of rocks that looks a bit like a throne, because especially to courts would think that's a throne.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So it's more about the delusion than the reality of the thing. Or to do like a kind of ghostly, but kind of beautiful sort of quasi, like medieval throne that's just sort of manifest out of nowhere to represent the delusion. You know what I mean? So like the model that exists is sort of halfway between, it's not really practical that they would build the bone throne.
Like before a battle.
Yeah.
Especially if it becomes like, as you say, like a rules factor. Like is a part of how effective your army is you have to have one of these things somewhere. And also, like, I do find like terrain is increasingly large in AOS, and the 6x4 feels increasingly small. And, how those words work.
Biggishly little.
Yeah. But the table shrinks very quickly when you start putting terrain down, especially with the movement rules and, how difficult it can be to get around that stuff. And that's an interesting part of the game for sure. But the more terrain you kind of force onto the table, the trickier it gets and the kind of fiddlier it can get. Eventually. The shipwrecks in particular. I remember the first time I ever played against Ideneth. This was before this was FAQ'd, but they used the shipwrecks to just block off like the vast majority of the map. And because like they're units that could fly or move in particular ways, like, it was really cheesy basically, and it wasn't really in the spirit of the fantasy that had been laid out in the books. I do worry about that stuff with terrain.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's sort of also maybe moving a little bit away from what you maybe think of from a traditional kind of fantasy wargaming terrain board. Like, I think if you play on a flat, in some ways the board I've got is decent for this, because if you play on a flat surface and stick to the advice that you have basically one substantial terrain feature per 2 square feet, so 6 on a board, then it is fine.
Yeah.
And actually, the sort of aura rules that surround particular terrain items, things that you can take cover in and you can't, that kind of thing, works quite well if everything's on a flat plane. But it gets complicated as soon as you have like rolling hills, like the old traditional sort of like polystyrene hill thing. Or books with a cloth over them, where you can't put stuff in because it's going really weirdly sideways, and the model's sort of falling over and things because you're trying to cram things in the wrong places. Like, I feel like, it makes sense that Games Workshop would do this, but like the ideal sort of platform for a game of AOS is like a flat plane which has 6 pieces of terrain on it that each have an interesting aura effect, and then maybe 2 extra pieces of terrain provided by each player that are then inserted in interesting places to kind of create some sort of technical texture. But otherwise, you're not thinking a lot about things like elevation or line of sight or, that kind of thing. Because it's, you are, but it's not as like prevalent as it might have been in a few iterations of this type of game ago.
Yeah, that's for sure. You used to hit bonuses and stuff for being elevated, and what does elevated mean and that kind of stuff, and it becomes, you don't want analog kind of rule decisions in the middle of a game that should be either you have the bonus or not. And I still think AOS struggles with cover, because what does being inside a terrain piece mean? And a lot of the terrain pieces have been designed without the rules in mind, it feels like, because they are just kind of like tiered, and they don't have like a flat base where you can say that's in or out, and you just kind of have to eyeball it and sort of.
Well, it's like if you put your, I don't know, little Azerite ruins or something, and you mount them on a piece of MDF, then suddenly it's more easy to say you're in cover because you're on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than just within the walls of a building.
Yeah.
Like I would always be happy to house rule it to be like, if you're within the walls of a building, then you're in cover, because that's literally
what you would do. Yeah.
Because actually, traditionally in life, the floor is not the thing that gives you cover.
Exactly. Yeah, no, quite. And it's good to move away from to an extent from the line of sight thing where, I can see that man's hand, therefore this entire unit is not in cover, which is the sort of thing that you used to get. But even then, like, still, for large monsters, if you can see the tip of a wing, you can probably shoot it in AOS, right? Like, depending on how hard you argue. So that stuff isn't great. Terrain has never had a good kind of track history with a game that wants to be simple and clear. Like Terrain does create problems that I don't think they've quite solved yet.
Yeah.
Even before you get into the army pointing and balance stuff.
But nonetheless, they did make a little stage for a Slaughter Priest to shout from.
Yeah, they did.
And he can shout so hard a big axe comes out of space, but that's not a magical spell.
No, it's a prayer.
That is,
Let's all remember.
yeah. Wizards are shit. We don't like wizards. We may be doing blood sacrifices and creating various, effects, but it's definitely not a spell. Also, one of the prayers, is a crying skull.
Yeah.
That is crying blood.
A couple of those, don't you?
That makes, a couple of them, that makes wizards forget spells.
That's quite cool.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure how.
Yeah, you can have to write some pretty
Maybe they look at
hardcore-
it and go like, well, if that isn't a spell, then what the fuck am I doing? And then they forget that they're wizards.
I mean, it must be very distracting. If wizards are trying to hold incantations in the mind and crying blood.
That is the gothiest thing I've ever seen. I can't remember what I was thinking.
Yeah, right. It's like walking into the other room and forgetting why you're there.
Oh shit!
Oh no!
You always, I suppose a worshipper of corn never forgets what they came in for. 'Cause, like,
Only one thing. It's only the one thing.
yeah,
Skulls.
yeah. Slaughter Priest only want one thing, and it's disgusting. Skulls, certainly.
I like the new Source Priest named model. It's extremely OTT in a way.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Skull Taker.
Skull Taker. Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's great.
Cape of Skulls.
The like Khorne Bloodletters are a weird design for a demon, aren't they? Like big old heads and sort of gangly and really luminous. Not quite what
Yeah, I mean, it's like all of the god-specific demons are weird because it's like, I mean, pink horrors are basically a pink doom imp.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bloodletters are like a chibi Satan. You know what I mean? Like a big head, adorable anime Satan.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, there's something quite unusual about them, I think. Like,
Yeah.
Especially when you see them riding giant kind of armored bull things. It's like, how did this happen? How did this happen in the demon realm? How did these guys pair up?
Yeah, I mean,
on?
also, at what point did the god of excess go, crab women?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's my thing.
I mean, I suppose
I've seen the internet and now this.
crab women.
Crab women.
I mean, I suppose in this sort of plague bearers kind of make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Disease dudes. Zombies.
One-eyed zombies thing. They're always counting. Why? Don't know. But, you know, sure.
Yeah, whatever.
Speaking of, armored rhino, bull, bear, dog things, did you see today they revealed the new rules for Skull Crushers, Mighty Skull Crushers?
I did not.
As in the Khorne Cavalry.
Oh, yeah. They're the ones that...
I've got, you know,
Yeah. They're awesome. Great models.
They are great models, but they're a bit underwhelming previously.
Yeah.
They look kind of nuts now. So they've added a rule for them where, because currently when the unit charges on like a 4-up, you do D3 mortal wounds. And that's changing. So it's 2-up per model and it's 1 mortal wound. So if a unit of 3 charges, it's 3 2-ups for up to 3 mortal wounds. But if a unit of 6 charges, it goes back to D3 mortal wounds, but per model.
Oh, wow.
So a unit of, it's 6 2-ups. So on average, 1 will fail. So on average, it's 5d3 mortal wounds when they charge.
Oh, gosh.
Which is...
That's good.
It's good. I mean, the name is Skull Crusher, not
Yeah.
like, you know, just sort of like the charge, not like, Tar Pit, which was their previous role. So,
Yeah, quite.
yeah. So I think there's some cool stuff coming. Like, there's a lot of like quite, I mean, I think probably the time to talk about Khorne will be when that book's out, which will be next month, I imagine. But yeah, like they're obviously doing what I wanted them to do, which is have like a serious look at, you know, where that army's at and kind of rebalance things. The other thing I really like is, they've added a lot more and better buffs to the blood tithe table. So the blood tithe table is like Khorne gets a point every time a unit dies. Doesn't matter whose, because Khorne does not care, and so on and so on. And previously, because that can be used for either summoning or buffs, if it was a little bit weighted towards summoning, because new units, free units are almost always better than an amazing buff. But it feels like they're adding some like really amazing buffs to the other side.
Oh, cool.
So that means, I think that's quite a player-friendly decision. I'd have to see the book to know exactly how far it goes, because it means that you're still kind of able to take advantage of the full allegiance ability without
buying new boxes.
Without having to have like boxes of spare demons.
That's cool. That's cool. Nice. Excited.
Speaking of which, actually, like, it occurred to me playing a bunch of Zinch games this weekend, I would actually quite like a new Zinch book. like, I know it's not as urgent as with others, but like, almost, I didn't, so this is definitely a milestone. I played in a tournament this weekend, which we'll talk about in a bit, in last weekend, which we'll get to, but, and I didn't open the Tzeentch Battle Tome at all. Because none of it still applies. Like, everything has been FAQ'd.
Right.
Like,
Well,
you know, that all of the war scrolls for Zangor are completely wrong, because the correct war scrolls are in the Beasts of Chaos book. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or, I mean, obviously on the app and stuff, but it was like, you kind of know maybe you need a new book when you're not even looking in your book for any of the rules for any of your stuff.
Interesting.
Apart from artifacts. But even then, I have the errata, because most of them were rewritten. So it's like, you know, it's like, I would quite like,
they need to equalize a load of the Tzeentch models anyway. Stuff like Flamers just aren't like quite where they should be. Stuff like the Flaming Chariot. Still the way that Pink Horrors and stuff work and split could still do with refining, I think. And,
I think they're in an okay position, but they are weird.
They're still weird, which is, I mean, it's fine for Tzeentch to be weird, but I just feels like for the fantasy it's still not quite right.
Yeah.
And, just maybe a little bit of extra protection for some of their heroes and stuff like that. Like, some of their like lesser units that they usually just don't run in Tzeentch, presumably, right? Presumably you just go for a few things.
I do, but that's it, yeah.
It's not, but I mean, you want those, all units to do something ideally and be viable.
Yeah, I think they do to some extent. I think summoning helps a lot. As soon as you can get certain things for free, like they have a job. Like Screamers, like, you know, taking Screamers for 100 points versus Zangor Enlightened for 140 isn't really a competition. Like, that's probably the best value 40 points difference in the game. But when you can get them for free and you have a unit that can fly 16 inches. And
they're quite tough as well.
Can go, and is quite tough and can go and get an objective for you and win you the game. That's, you know, that's fine.
Yeah.
I definitely don't regret having a big demon sideboard, but I mean, we'll get to this. We're talking about playing a bunch of games, but yeah, like it's a thing. Yeah. Shall we talk about, Tiny Beastmen?
Let's do it. Tiny Beastmen.
Yeah.
Why are they so tiny?
They're Skaven. I'm sorry.
I see. Yeah, Skaven. Wow. Surprise battle time.
Surprise, very substantial battle time as well.
Yeah.
Like,
They sound amazing.
Nagash equivalent. It's great, that book.
Yeah.
So I went a bit mad and I decided that Skaven was my army in Fantasy Battle when I was a teenager. And so I'd always had in the back of my head, like, Skaven coming back would be, you know, having because the focus has been on Pestilence, which has never interested me. Skaven coming back would be one of my, like, break glass on shame pile kind of things.
Yeah.
And then I fell down a bit of a flight of stairs in terms of, like, one decision leading to another. And so, I will just own to the fact that I'm doing Skaven now.
Yeah. I'm very excited to fight some Skaven.
Specifically Scryer. I've always loved Scryer, and, I love how mad, that army can be now in a really fun way. So, I am going to see how far I get, but I'm actually like pretty much considering taking Scryer to London GT instead of Tzeentch. And because, the 2,000 point army I've got planned is only like 17 models.
Wow.
Because Scryer is
it's like war machines
bonkers,
and big dudes.
War machines and big dudes. So it's like, it's a very elite Skaven army. I think it's going to be extremely inconsistent and a bit mad, but that's the point. And that's maybe skipping to the end. So like, I talk about some of the Skaven stuff I've been painting and working on and things, but like, but the book I really, really like, sort of top to bottom. And I think it's, I think maybe because I wasn't like, I'm not really a death player, I didn't really get Legions of Gash, but this feels like a really great, consolidation of that army into a kind of coherent form, both from a lore point of view, but also from a, sort of equal balance of obviously lots of lore and some new stuff and some interesting kind of, sort of like, you know, fleshing out the Skaven's role within the Chaos Pantheon and the Horned Rat's position in the Chaos Pantheon.
Which we discussed before, like trying to figure out where he sits.
So he's sort of like it's like, it's a kind of a complicated sort of edge case, but like the Horned Rat has become a kind of a god of like, sort of, like almost like annihilation and ambition. Like, almost like hubris, like as opposed to, so somewhere like there are shades of the other Chaos Gods in Skaven, like all of them, like, and that's what's kind of neat about them. Like they have, like their defining trait is almost arrogance, which is something that isn't, all of the Chaos Gods kind of share to some extent, but you know, that it's the sort of, you know, it's this, you would say that maybe ambition was more of a Tzeentch thing, but it's this sort of desperate, being desperately convinced that the world owes you more than you're getting, and that you are the protagonist of the world.
Right.
And that, if you scrape and claw and betray and work hard enough, the world will come, will be yours and you will rule over its ruins, basically.
Right.
So it's like, it's not their sort of, love of plagues and things doesn't really it aligns them with Nurgle close enough for Pestilence and Nurgle to be allies. But the Skaven are working towards the end of the world. They're probably the only Chaos faction that would want to end the world, because when the world is over, vermin will rule. That's the sort of the difference in a way. Khorne fights itself into a corner, and maybe Slanesh, eats itself into a stupor, and Tzeentch's sort of cycles of ambition and betrayal and aspiration and things are always almost cyclical. Masters betraying their masters, being betrayed by their apprentices forever, and all that stuff sort of applies to Skaven, but they are they're kind of Lacey's frame is almost like a foil for the rest of Chaos, because they kind of embody all of it and they're constantly fucking up, but also they may well win in the end. It's an interesting sort of, if you have to do an anti-chaos faction, or there used to be Malal, who was the chaos god that was going to wipe out all the other chaos gods.
Yeah.
So it's that's where the Horned Rat is kind of coming in.
Okay.
It's almost like this sort of I don't know, almost the irony, the sort of, I don't know if that makes sense. The sort of, the sort of the lurking potential for everything else to come crashing down at any time. And it's really nicely sort of evocative of how it all fits together as well, and how it fits into AOS more broadly.
Yeah. That's interesting. Rats are always in the rules. They're always all around.
Yeah.
They're waiting for the walls to crumble and, everyone to die, and then,
and they'll try and make that happen.
Yeah, they'll invent strange warpfire throwers that do lots of damage and, multiple
yeah.
rooms.
There's a great description of the fact that every single Skaven, no matter who they are, kind of believes that they are the main character of
Right.
Skaven. And that, it's they're all basically tiny, angry, toothy, Tennessee Williams protagonists.
Right.
They're all one great deal away from getting out of this town.
The one. Yeah.
This is the heroes of a Bruce Springsteen song if they were rat engineers that blew themselves up. Which is a cross section that doesn't really exist anywhere else. But every Skaven believes itself to be the hero, but the counterpoint to that is they're cowards. And that's one of the reasons they run, is because I've got to save my life. I'm the most important one.
Yeah.
But also they are all shit. And so, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So most Skaven don't really realize how meaningless they were until the moment when they're killed in their thousands at the behest of a minor political squabble between two Skaven clans. You know what I mean? It's kind of a nice sort of tragic irony to their entire existence.
That's
it's quite
a good
fun.
angle. Yeah.
And there's loads of good stuff. I mean, it's quite a thick battle tome. There's a lot of, fiction for each of the clans and how they work, and a nice amount of sort of freedom to have your own takes on different clans. There are the 4 great clans, and those are the ones that are sort of still around.
Yeah, good.
But there are also lost clans and things like that. So there are alternatives to Pestilence, Eshin, Verminous, and Pestilence, Eshin, Verminous, Scryer, Molder. So it's 5 great clans and Master Clan, and how it all sort of fits together, and how the Vermin Lords fit into that as well. And it's really, really good stuff, and made me fully back into the Rat Men. The other really cool thing about it, I think, is I think its way of handling multiple factions within a faction is among the more elegant I've seen.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother with, color scheme specific rules, which have been coming into AOS quite a lot, right? Different hosts of Stormcast.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother with that at all, because obviously the clans are already there. But also, it doesn't, it's got quite a cool way of reconciling all of the clans while also giving you the ability to specialize. And I think it's quite an interesting way of thinking about how to balance AOS, because, so are you aware of how Skaven Allegiance works now?
So I gather the battle line if has been expanded to be much more flexible in some ways, but I'm not sure what the specifics are.
Right, so there is now only one Skaven allegiance.
Right.
It's called Skaven Tide. Like, there is no such thing as a Clan Scryer army. There is no such thing as a generic Skaven army. Every Skaven army is a Skaven Tide army. I think they came up with a new word for it because it needed to be distinct from what's come before.
Yeah.
So it's a new keyword that is on every Skaven war scroll. And a Skaven Tide army has shitloads of abilities because things like, because each clan has abilities that apply to its heroes if there are heroes from that clan in that army. And you don't need to be mono clan to get access to them. They are effectively mini allegiance abilities. In fact, two of them, the Pestilence and the Scryer ones, are based on the allegiance abilities that were in the previous General's Handbook.
Right.
So they were previously and this is one of the reasons I think it's confused people, is they were previously just referred to as allegiance abilities, and they're not anymore. They're just parts of the Skaven Tide allegiance ability. So if you have a Clan Scryer Warlock in your army, the Inventors, you gain access to their special thing. And that's true regardless of what you want to do. The way the battle line if works is if your entire army shares a clan keyword, then certain choices become battle line rather than not. And that also, the other alternative is if your general is master clan, which is the clan that sits on top of everything, and every other unit is and not including allies, every other unit, not including allies, is a clan keyword, then you get access to that clan's battle line.
Okay.
So you can do a full Clan Scryer army, but with a master clan general, like Thanquol, for example, and still take advantage of Scryer battle line. But the cool thing about this is, as soon as you do that, it switches off Clan Rats as battle line.
Right, so you've got to go for their specialized
Because as soon as you have Clan Rats, you don't have, 100% of your army isn't Scryer anymore, because Clan Rats don't have the Scryer, Molder, Pestilence keywords.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, because the problem with battle line if, I think in other contexts, it's like battle line if you have this general, is there's a lot of mixing and matching. So like, you might have, there's loads of armies that have, this is battle line if your general is a particular general, but you don't lose your other battle line. So you can take advantage of maybe like your cheap generic battle line, but, also, edge in a different general. And I think that can encourage some sort of weird choices in terms of who your general is. Like, I don't know, like taking making a wizard your general in an Idoneth army, even though you have got an Achillean king, because you want the bowman to be battle line rather than the eels, something
there
like that.
are loads of examples like that.
Yeah, like where it's like you're getting some weird things. Whereas at Skaven, you are forced to choose basically, and that's a really, I think, a good decision because it's it becomes it creates a much softer gradient, I think, between I want to take 2 units of Clan Rats but have the rest of my army be Scryer. I've got 3 units of Clan Rats, then I've got battle line for 2,000 points, but I still take advantage of all the Scryer allegiance stuff. But if I'm taking Storm Fiends, which are battle line if you are Scryer, then I'm paying for them and they're not counting towards my battle line tax, essentially.
Yeah.
Or you can take Storm Fiends as battle line, but then your choices are just Storm Fiends or Acolytes as battle line, at which point you are settling into a strategy that's got to work around the fact that your battle line units have 3 models in them. And it's like...
Yeah, Clan Rats are cheap though, right?
Clan Rats are cheap.
They must be very cheap. You must be able to probably have them in your army even if you do have a specialized battle line.
No, because they don't... Well, you lose the specialized battle line if you take them.
Right. Yeah. So if they're in there, they have to be.
So if you're taking Clan Rats as battle line or Storm Vermin, then they are your only battle line options. So you are committing to 3 units of them.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That still leaves loads of space because they are cheap. But it's kind of hard to explain without like giving examples of armies, and maybe when we play with stuff, it'll be more obvious why this is, I think, cool. But, so rather than get totally bogged down in the rule stuff, it's more that like, I think it's an interesting way of, because previously, and I think the key thing is that the things that make those clans interesting is like maybe the abilities that their heroes get simply by being in the army, by being in a Skaven Tide army. It's the fact that doesn't get switched off by going for a mixed allegiance. You know what I mean? It's like you can draw from any Skaven unit, and if you are mixing and matching, then you're committing to having Clan Rats as your battle line, and there are good reasons to do that. But But you can also choose to go in a really specific direction, at which point the whole army kind of transforms completely. And I think the reason it's cool is like Skaven are a horde army if you're mixing and matching, because clan rats are your battle line.
Yeah.
So you're inevitably going to have hordes of them, and they're going to be better in big hordes because they are better in big hordes because of the other Skaven rules.
Yeah.
But when you specialize, you end up in weird situations like the Scryer, full Scryer ends up being like I say, like a 17 model 2,000 point army because it goes hugely elite. And I think the only way you can do that is with this kind of interesting kind of set of conditional sort of rules built into the army as a whole.
Yeah.
And what's neat about that is it allows the army to transform dramatically from one field to another without while still remaining a Skaven army, which is really neat.
Yeah, I like the way that might force you, it might build automatic vulnerabilities into different types of army as well.
It does, yeah.
So, I mean, like, you lose your chaff, but you gain perhaps a lot more damage output or something, and a lot more centralized low model count, which is quite an interesting trade-off. But yeah, that's to have a look at the book to see how it really works.
There's another interesting one, I don't know. I mean, everything in AOS is abusable, but I had quite a good time just sort of theory crafting it, basically, because there are other interesting things like, I suspect, because Scryer is very high damage output, quite vulnerable, and their weapons tend to blow up. So, you know what I mean? They are glass cannons.
Yeah.
I feel like there are other considerations that go beyond simply like points values and damage values, which is things like how many drops is your army. And there is a single Scryer battalion, like a sort of Omni battalion, and it's unlike any War Scroll battalion in the game, I think, in that it only counts as one War Scroll battalion, but it is made up of like 6 different War Scroll battalions, and you have to take 3 of them.
Well,
No, you have to take 2 of them and the main one. So, and however you do it, they have clearly, and they're sort of different. So there's like one that specializes in lightning, one that specializes in doom wheels, one that specializes in flamers. You know what I mean? They're all kind of like, it's like, what is the composition of your, like, cadre of inventors, basically?
Yeah.
And they get different bonuses and different combinations based on how you create this kind of modular battalion. But however you arrange it, the minimum cost of that whole battalion, when you take the sort of minimum number of units to fill in all the gaps, is about 1,800 points. So there's basically no way to do it and then stick on another big unit or a big ally or something. Like, it is your 1,000-point army, particularly because some of the Skaven endless spells are amazing. So you're probably going to want that last couple of 100 points for that stuff. So it feels like that's like almost like an army in a box. And what you're getting for that is a bunch of buffs, but also the ability to drop the entire army at once, which is a big thing.
Yeah.
But it's sort of built into this risk reward thing where if you mixed and matched, if you ignored that and just built a Scryer army, you can use those points much more freely and then drop in Thankwall, who's amazing, as your general or something for 400 points and build it in that direction, or add a Vermin Lord and do it in a different direction. Like, it's really neat. Really, really like it.
Cool.
Yeah, it's, and I think they've done a good job of reining in. I think there's definitely going to be stuff in Skaven where, I think I'm maybe committing myself to another army where sometimes it just annihilates things.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's going to end up, I think it's slightly more fun than Tzeentch to some extent in terms of mortal wound output, simply because there's such a high chance all the time that everything blows up and you're encouraged to gamble.
Yeah.
And I think probably the skill of that army is knowing when to gamble with the fact that your warp lightning cannon might blow itself up. Like, and the cool thing is, they don't blow up when they fail. They blow up when they go spectacularly well.
Right.
Which is different to like a Perils of the Warp thing where like not only have I failed to cast, but my wizard exploded. It's more like this went so well, my 180 point war machine is now also dead. You know what I mean?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting balance.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of things where like the weapon teams, you know, if they roll a certain way, often in a way that's quite good for them in terms of how much damage their output is, they are killed immediately after the attack is resolved.
Interesting.
So it's like, you still get to do your big one-off attack.
And they pop.
And
That's
then
it.
they pop. Which is, I think, you know, if you compare that to, I don't know, Tzeentch Wizard has just done a shitload of damage. It's a slightly different feeling. Like we've talked a lot in the past about mortal wound bad feel, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that maybe there's slightly more charm to like, yes, it's annoying that you just annihilated my Star Drake with this ridiculous warp lightning blast, but also quite a lot of your army has exploded.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess that's what Sky does then. If they're
Pretty much.
if they're just like low model count but really high risk.
Yeah.
Are they quick as well? I mean,
They can be.
Tend to be quite fast.
They can be. I managed to find a quite silly edge case where you can get a Doom wheel to do potentially a 51-inch regular move once.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Where it basically, like I would call it maximum warp because I think that's probably the word for it. But basically there's, and that's a brilliant bit of like potential complete fuckery because, that is based on the fact that there's a new artifact, I think called Vial of the Fulminator, which is basically Nitro. Like that's what it is.
Right.
It's Nitro. And if you have a Warlock standing next to a Scoria War Machine, so it's either this or a Warp Lightning Cannon, you can give it the Nitro in its movement phase. And then you double its move characteristic, which is quite good for like, I don't know, I need to scoot my Warp Lightning Cannon like an extra 3 inches or something. But the other thing it's useful for is Doom Wheels have a 4d6 movement value. So, if you roll incredibly, and then there's a battalion that adds to their movement and stuff like that. So that's where you can get, if you rolled 4 6s and then doubled it and then added 3, then you can get to that 51-inch move. Okay. But
very unlikely.
It's very unlikely, but it's very funny. Like it averages out at about a 35-inch move, which is still fine. Because they also do more, they can fly. They count as being able to fly.
They run over stuff.
If they're running over something that has fewer than 3 wounds.
Okay. So small stuff there. Just trample. Yeah. That's really cool.
So they can just sort of go wherever the fuck they want, really. And run over units, and they do mortal wounds to every unit they run over. But the really fun thing is when you roll the dice for a Doom Wheel, for its movement value, you can, if you like, choose to reroll it. Like, just, if you're not happy with how far you've gone, you can choose to reroll it. However, if in the reroll, any of the dice show a 1, your opponent gets to do the move instead of you.
Oh, holy shit.
So,
oh boy.
Yeah. So I don't think you ever do the reroll in the turn where you do use the Nitro. You just don't risk it. Yeah. But there is the potential where your opponent then rolls the 4 6s and then just does like a big donut all over your army with your own Doom Wheel. And the lore for that is great because the description is that just sometimes when the rats inside the Doom Wheel get too excited, the engineer is too busy fighting the rats inside the Doom Wheel to control the Doom Wheel.
Yeah.
And so just doesn't really know where it's going. It's just off. Like,
that's awesome.
It's great.
That's great. It's to refresh a really cool older model as well, which is still really good.
Oh yeah, those models are great. So yeah, I'm partly responsible, I think, for the Carrion Empire selling out everywhere, but I'm really looking forward to cracking on with it. And they've done some things like they've reined in Storm Fiends, I think, in an interesting way, because they were quite abusive. I don't know if you ever went up against them.
No, I didn't. I don't know what they do.
So Storm Fiends are they're rat ogres that are also Bane, basically. Yeah. So, with the little brain rat strapped to the back.
I remember them.
Vermintide. If you played Vermintide 2, they're all over.
You fight many of them, yes.
Yeah. Nice bit of they've been nerfed. There's no getting around that, but I think they've been, it's a good example of, an old War Scroll getting a proper rethink. So previously the issue was they had 1 of 3 weapon options, but the box, is 1 of each. It's 1 of each weapon options. Well, there are 6 possible loadouts for Stormfiend, but in the box you get, 3 pairs, if that makes sense. Like each body can have 2 different weapons. So
buy multiple boxes to do
you buy 3 boxes in order to get the 3 good ones.
Yeah, it's like that Caradron exploit before that got FAQ.
And the previous thing was maxing out the number of warp fire throwers, which is like an 8-inch range flamer weapon. But previously it just did 6 mortal wounds. So you'd put 3 of them in a unit and then just do 18 mortal wounds. That's that.
Yeah.
And that's boring.
Yeah.
I believe that's how it worked, and it was just a bit crap. So change number 1 is, that now the unit has to be built like it is in the box, basically.
Okay.
Like you can pick, you still got a bunch of loadout options, but you need, there are essentially 3 types of Stormfiend. There's which type of melee, there's a melee one, which either has 1 or 2 different types of melee weapons. There's the ranged weapon, which either has a flamer or a mortar. And then there's the sort of utility one, which either has a rattling gun or a mining drill. And now those are the 3 pairings, and a unit has to be comprised of, those 3 pairings, basically. And then the flamers, and this is like an army-wide change, which is quite cool because it makes it more consistent with the rest of AOS. Flamers now work like the Gaunt Summoner's anti-horde spell. So you measure, it's how many models are within 8 inches of them. And then you roll a dice for each of those models, and on a 4 up to mortal wound.
Okay.
So it's really good.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's now anti-horde. It's not like a hero killer, because the old one was just like, hello. Like,
not even like a small hero, just like probably your biggest thing.
Yeah, right. Whereas now it's like specifically, it's number of models within 8 inches, and it's a big base, it could be quite a lot, but, most like tunneling and deep striking abilities mean you have to set up 9 from an enemy. So, they get more powerful the closer they are. Like, it works. It's a good,
Interesting.
good roll. There's a nuts. Thankwall has a giant 4-armed rat ogre as a mount, and can put a warp fire thrower on each arm.
Oh my god.
And it's the same rule. So he rolls 4 dice per model.
So he charges in and then just
rolls 4 dice per model for every model within 8 inches,
wow.
and every 4 up is mortal wound, which is the sequitur killer, basically. It's just
yeah.
The other really funny, and this is the last thing I'll say about Skaven, because I appreciate them banging on about them, but I didn't realize this until I realized how funny this was. Every Skaven hero gains the scurry away rule, which means when you activate them to fight in the combat phase, you can instead choose to move and retreat. So if you charge a Skaven and don't fight it straight away, the Skaven player can activate it and just leave, because that's what they do. They just, and they count as having retreated, etc., but the idea is they could be really difficult to pin down. So, and that's cool because, as we've spoken about plenty of times, a lot of the most interesting decisions happen in the combat phase. Yeah. So knowing you kind of have to fight the heroes first if you want to kill the heroes, because otherwise they're going to piss off while you deal with the clan rats, which is extremely Skaven-y.
Yeah, very, very.
But also there's no limitation on that. Every single Skaven hero can do it. It doesn't matter if they are, riding a giant monster, or they are a giant monster in the case of a Vermin Lord. Yeah. They can just choose, or no Skaven is ever too big to run away is like a kind of army-wide rule, which I think is...
Especially the heroes are just always keen to throw smaller rats in front of themselves, or, it's just, irrespective of how big they are, they always have fodder around them.
I think it's really fun.
Yeah, that's really neat. That's really neat. It sounds great. Like, I've been meaning to dig into it and listen to some of the sort of like more competitive podcasts, which will all be raving over some of this stuff. But it does sound quite swingy, a lot of it. And the variance is an interesting game feel thing, which we've discussed before. So yeah, it'd be interesting to play against it, especially as an army that fears mortal wounds. But
I think it would reward, I think it's the kind of thing that will inevitably reward, understanding and strategy, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, you'd always expect to take losses, but I don't think a Scryer army, I think the big difference with Tzeentch that I'm really interested to sort of try and explore is Tzeentch actually has decent staying power, but in a super weird way, right? It's like, we just won't stop coming back from other dimensions or splitting in half or whatever. Whereas like Scryer particularly have no staying power whatsoever. And I think most Skaven armies to some extent will lose a war of attrition. So it's like, weathering that initial kind of barrage and then taking advantage of low bravery and just...
Yeah, interesting. I was going to say they probably have very low bravery, given that they are cowardly rats.
Yeah. But they also now have portals that allow them to teleport around, like in Portal.
Oh, that's cool.
So, yeah, because of the gnaw holes. Because they can just gnaw holes in reality.
They just tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. So the other, and I maybe don't need to spend as much time on it, but I also picked up the Flesh Eater Courts book simply because I'll probably do something with the Flesh Eater Courts half of Carrion Empire. And, I think maybe we'll get more into it, but, I think of the 2 new books, I suspect Flesh Eater Courts are the more competitive. And inevitably there will be good Skaven armies. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I'm not a very competitive AOS player, but it certainly feels like, the more abusable of the 2. I don't know if that, I might be wandering into territory I'm not an expert in, but it's telling to me, I actually quite like the book. I like the lore of Flesh Eater Courts. I like the kind of delusion idea, the fact that they're sort of, they do a lot in that book, to flesh out the nature of that delusion and what it feels like to be them. And I think of all of the, I think the Flesh Eater Courts are the most clearly the good guys in their own minds. They don't experience any doubt about that. There's a good story about, Flesh Eater Courts, sort of swarming to the aid of a night haunt procession, that is being sort of held back by the anvils of the Heldenhammer, and what the Flesh Eater Courts perceive is huddled pilgrims in their robes, their sort of ragged shawls, being, sort of terrorized by these horrifying automata from the skies, wreathed in lightning. And they're throwing their bodies at the enemy to protect these kind of holy pilgrims from these kind of monstrous invaders from beyond. And they're absolutely the good guys in their own story, which is kind of quite fun.
Superb. Also love that this is what the Bretonnians have become in Age of Sigmar as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, it doesn't go into huge details of it, but there is plenty of hints. There are fleur-de-lis on stuff and...
Yeah, their dedication to heraldry and obsession with kind of iconography is quite similar to the old Bretonian.
Their courtly structure is specifically the same. And there's like, there are echoes of old Bretonian stuff. So like, one of like the roles in the court is whoever's the Lord Marrowbroth. And there's a lot of the things in that story that specifically echo the Bretonian version of Mordred, whose name I've forgotten, who's Marrowbord. I
can't remember. Yeah,
it's a one Fantasy Battle dude, but he's, and, who's the Black Knight in Fantasy Battle, basically.
Right.
So there are sort of moments where it sort of teases at it, but they don't ever commit to like, this is exactly what became of them.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad that they don't, but I just like that idea that, like, that's a very dark thing to happen to a faction in Warhammer.
It is, yeah. Partly though, I was rereading a bunch of Bretonian lore in order to kind of like try and figure out if I could find any more of those links, having just read the Flesh Eater Court's book.
Yeah. And
I'm actually now pretty convinced that the Celestia Prime is Leonka rather than Karl Franz.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I'd sort of forgotten this, but right at the end of, because obviously Karl Franz turns into basically a Stormcast right at the end of End Times.
Yeah.
But so does Leonka. Like, he turns to basically like this winged, angelic, golden sort of god man, basically. And I sort of had this feeling that like the bait and switch would probably be it being him rather than...
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that was cool.
Particularly because I think, there's that story of like the elves, Tyrion and Teclis, gave Sigmar a very valuable soul. And, as far as I can remember, Leonka's soul is ushered away by the Lady of the Lake, who is an elf, because Bretonians are elf-worshipping humans, basically.
Yeah.
There are stuff that,
Yeah, you could see that, the through line.
Right, yeah.
But then, Karl Franz did really like hammers.
He did really like hammers.
And, he knows how to use that hammer.
He does. Yeah, he comes down from space. Redeems you in the face.
I love the new Prime rules. They're very good.
Yeah. Oh man, I haven't seen the Prime on the table for a long time.
No, but I really liked what they did with that War Scroll. They just tweaked it just a little bit, and suddenly it's a thing that you could sensibly take in a 2,000 point army. And all it was like an extra attack and a bit of extra consistency, but not too much. And it's a really fun model to use now. Like, it's still one of my favorite Stormcast models. Super nice.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, I think maybe in terms of Flesh Eater Court's rules, it'd be easy to talk about some of the games I've played against them this weekend than actually like get into the nitty gritty of it. But like,
so it was a tournament using all the new, it must obviously.
Yeah, it was using all the new stuff, but also first and second place with Flesh Eater Courts. And I think, so I'll put it this way. I'm not sure there is an army that can abuse 1,000 points more than Flesh Eater Courts.
Yeah, I'm interested to talk about this actually, because one of the reasons why I was put off, I was busy this weekend anyway, but one of the reasons why I probably wouldn't have wanted to go is because it's very hard to make a good or at all competitive 1,000 point Stormcast list. Because, you just don't build enough stuff into the army that can, perform certain roles. Like you can't have a big hero in there and then not still get in enough battle line that actually will do anything. And you end up with a very small elite army that can't actually kill stuff very well. Whereas maybe with Flesh Eater Courts or Skaven, even with low points costs, those Horde armies pack a lot of models.
There weren't any Skaven there, so that's, right. But there were, Moon Clan. But so here's the thing, and I think Flesh Eater Courts are a bit of a perfect storm, and, so they're an army that doesn't have very many models at all. They've got basically 3 boxes, really, and the new Arch Regent. And so they all need to be good, and they're all pretty good. They're a summoning army, so obviously there's a lot of free points on the table that you can access in particular ways. But also, they have excellent monsters, right? Because of the Terrorgeist / Zombie Dragon kit. And then I think the real thing, is that, that monster is very, very accessible. In that if you are collecting the Flesh Eater Courts army, it probably just makes sense to keep buying the start collecting box. And maybe the odd box of ghouls separately. You know what I mean? Because it's like, that's literally almost all the kits. So just keep getting that. Because it's, it's a 50 quid box, but it's got everything in it. Which means that all of the things that I think particularly unbalanced 1,000 point games or small games of Age of Sigmar, like having too many Behemoths or having too many free units and that kind of thing, all apply to one faction. But like, whereas maybe a different faction might be able to get, I don't think there's another faction that can, pile up the big unkillable monsters quite so much. But let's say hypothetically there was a scenario where Bloodthirsters could be battle line in a Cornet army, right? Like hypothetically, 400 point monster. it's not different. I mean, there is now a scenario where, Terrorgeist's a battle line. So, one of the armies that did very well in the event this weekend was just 3 Terrorgeists. And,
Some direwolves or something.
nope.
Really?
Because the Terrorgeist a battle line.
Oh, of course, sorry.
So
you
it's
don't
got a
need
Ghoul
that,
King and then 2 unmounted Terrorgeists.
Yeah.
Ghoul King on Terrorgeist and 2 unmounted Terrorgeists is, an army. Like I genuinely think like 3 unpainted Terrorgeists is like just your way into like just winning a bunch of, it's just showing up with knights. It's that sort of same thing where in a scenario where if no one can hurt it, what are you going to do? But in the scenario where, let's say the new Khorne book means that if your general is such a certain bloodthirster, then a different kind of bloodthirster's battle line. And technically you can get 3 bloodthirsters into 1,000 points. People will definitely abuse that. But the flip side is bloodthirsters are like 70 quid models. So you won't see as many of them around. Whereas like, I'm pretty sure every Flesh Eater Courts player is literally drowning in Terrorgeists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it's a combination of having the models, but also having the ability to kind of really heavily, manipulate them. Similarly, because the thing the throne does is make the once per game summoning abilities for all of the different units completely free. Because normally, for an Archregent or a Ghoul King to bring on a unit of models for free, which is very powerful, like, each Archregent costs 200 points and provides 200 points of free models. And is also an excellent caster and a great combat hero. But normally their ability costs a command point. So it's a once per game. So if you have let's say in a 1,000 point army, you put, 3 or 4 Archregents and then some ghouls for battle line. In a regular game, you're going to only be able to bring in your extra 200 points once per turn and you have a really wonky army. But because of what the Charnel Throne does, which it makes that, it gets rid of that command point cost, you just deploy all of them on the, throne and then create an 800 point army at the start of the game.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you have a 1,800 point army.
That sounds bad.
Do you know what I mean?
Is that really how it works?
Yep.
That's horrendous.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, it is a bit nuts. So, and that's a huge investment because it's 1 Archregent per box of Carrion Empire, right? So it's
yeah.
But that's what I mean by like not being quite so sure about the rules for them. Like I think they've gotten a lot better. I think they probably needed to get better. And, I'm hoping that I'll probably make a desperately suboptimal Flesh Eater Courts army in trying to make a relatively wholesome Flesh Eater Courts army. But yeah, I was a bit sort of struck by like, that just feels extremely abusable. And particularly because it hinges on the terrain piece. Like, I mean, I suppose you could say that there's an opportunity cost in terms of the terrain piece because, as soon as your opponent knows where you placed it, they know exactly where you're going to plonk all your heroes. But to be honest, the benefit is so great that there's no reason not to the heroes just need to be within an inch of it. So there's not even really a size restriction. You just put it in your own deployment zone and then deploy your heroes on it.
Or behind it.
Yeah. And then in your hero phase, you do the thing. And they are, they're also 6 or 7 wound heroes with a death save. So, or an ignore. So you're probably not going to kill all, even if I got like let's say I got the first turn with a load of mortal wounds and just went in there and tried to kill them as fast as possible. Yeah. I'm not going to get through like 18 wounds worth of hero. You know what I mean?
No,
like,
you're not.
It's a bit of a weird one. Bit of a weird one.
It doesn't sound good of all games. But then like giant monster games, the downside to having 3 giant monsters is they don't get objectives and things. But I think that's only true against certain types of army where you have enough stuff to actually screen off. Because they're big base models. And what you do against big base models is you have lots of stuff in rows or just like blocking stuff off where you can't make it awkward. They can't quite fit stuff in. But I mean, especially if like in a 1,000 point game, they're probably just going to kill everything by turn 3 anyway, just because they're still really good as well. So yeah, that does sound pretty rough in the 1,000 points.
Yeah, and they've got quite good, like command traits and mount traits now as well.
Yeah.
So there's a really great spell that means that, a monster can fight as if it's still at its full wound threshold. So like, there's a lot of anti-monster kind of tech, basically.
Keeps them strong.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to sound too negative because I'm definitely not a Flesh Eater Courts player and I can basically tell that somewhere in the world, like, Chimp is basically going like, what do you fucking know? Don't make them take it away.
Yeah. And they must have thought about it. You don't do that without knowing that people are going to take 3 Terrorgeists.
I feel like I feel like though it's less, maybe specifically about this book and obviously we can get to this, but and more about the problems with 1,000 points AOS. All of that free summoning and stuff is less pronounced as an issue in 2,000 points because the other person's just got more. I feel like if you manage to get 800 points of free stuff in a 2,000 point game, most armies have a way of getting there, whether it's through resurrection or something like that. And if they can't get there, then they probably have extremely good units. But it's literally proportionally not quite the same as,
Yeah, there's loads of ways that AOS balances differently at 1,000 points, especially scenarios where it requires someone or something to stand on the point. That's often a significant chunk of your army that has to stand still and not actually participate in the battle. And that is an enormous problem for Stormcast, for example. If you knife to the heart, you need heroes to be capturing objectives.
Yeah.
And so you've got 120 point hero and you need more than one because you might play knife to the heart and suddenly they're just standing on each objective or they're standing on one objective and that's 240 points of your army that's probably barely involved in the battle if the rest of your stuff is moving around. And if you've got a low model count, it's just your ability to screen stuff that would obliterate you in the game from many, many armies isn't there.
Yeah.
So for Stormcast, unless you're allying into some cheesy load of skinks or something, you just,
a great
cheesy skinks. You're not going to screen off the stuff that will let, loads of armies have ways of dropping stuff next to you that will do massive mortal wounds and delete a hero. And the way you defend that, and against monster lists as well, the way you defend that is you just deny space, and you just can't do that with an elite army at 1,000 points. An elite army at 2,000 points, suddenly you can. You have enough models, it's a similar sized board, right? Same size board, in fact, in a lot of tournaments. And suddenly you can actually start screening off and start, owning points with the model count, but it doesn't work very well at 1,000 points. It's weird, it almost feels like you need bans at 1,000 points to make it more competitive.
I was thinking about this. I was thinking that, I thought one solution would be to so at the moment you have minimum 1 hero, minimum 2 battle line. My suggestion would be minimum 1 hero, minimum 2 battle line, minimum 1 other unit. Because that cuts off, it wouldn't solve everything, but it cuts off a bunch of edge cases where it's all, it's for example, all heroes and then the minimum amount of battle line to abuse hero abilities, for example. Or if you have a scenario where, you can, for example, make monsters battle line, it also forces you to take something else, which will probably prevent you from getting so many bear moths in, if that makes sense. Cause it's you could no longer be able to do the 3 Terrorgeists thing. You could do 2 Terrorgeists and some other stuff, which is immediately a very different feeling scenario. So I think, that I haven't really tested that or thought about how it would apply to every army, but.
No. Yeah, it's definitely a problem in against 1,000 where even if you bump up to 1,500, you get a better game in my experience.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of extra model count just makes the game work a bit better because you can actually form screens and do
And you also move into the 2,000 point battle line requirements. 1,500 points requires 3 battle lines.
So you're forced to take, that extra unit, which you're talking about, which actually makes it look more like an army. And yeah.
What is, we haven't really talked about, Hobby Month at all, but I appreciate we both had a relatively slight one.
Oh yeah, mine's been super slight because I'm still working on, Blackstone Fortress. I'm still working through the Traitor Guard.
Right.
Though on my second half of the Traitor Guards, I've done them in 2 halves, 7 and then 7.
Yeah.
And inverted the colours for the second half. And, there's just a lot on them. It's a bit like I like the models, but it's a bit like the new Primaris in that there's so many little grenades and rags and bits and stuff dripping off them. Totally makes sense for the fantasy for those guys. They've lived in this fortress and they're scrabbling, looting stuff all the time and they've become,
Put spikes on stuff.
And, they've stylized themselves in that way. The models are great. But they're quite a ball ache to paint. And I feel like the more time I invest in them, the less reward I get out of models that small that you're really probably not going to be paying that much attention to in the end.
Yeah. The depressing realization that I get this from my Zangor.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just fling these around. 3 are dead, fine.
Yeah, but I think even the Zangor, they look spectacular because they've got, they're sort of such vivid colours. So you've got
right, yeah.
gold and blue and, kind of ivory colours and just lots of kind of depth of interest there. Whereas just kind of khaki and black is you're not going to look at, there's no way for me to make that wow. I don't know how to make that pop and look super, and they're not supposed to be, they're supposed to be grubby and they're supposed to be just kind of ordinary. They're not supposed to outshine the heroes. But I find the amount of effort I have to put in to try and get them up to standard I'm happy with isn't as rewarding as it has been with even with the heroes for sure, but even with like the ghouls, which I dry brushed and now just like, yep, they're great. And they pop and they look awesome.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like where effort actually pays off.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think in this case, it's a matter of color palette, where like certain color palettes probably reward you less for going deeper into detail unless you're photographing them, because they're just not going to explode off the surface and sort of be like give you that wow pop that other stuff does. So I'm really feeling the kind of, I don't know, like camo fatigues. Fatigue. Yeah. Where it's just dull colors that are just exist. The reason that the whole point of camo is that it's dull and unexciting to the senses. So if you have to put a lot of effort into painting that, then you're putting a lot of effort into something that's going to be dull and unexciting to the senses. And it fits the fancy the models, but as a man who's painted gold giant space beings for 2 years previously, it's been a slightly frustrating shift down to that level.
Yeah, it's funny because I really loved doing Rohan because it was sort of like the sort of like, and I found that generally like a lot of my better looking stuff is slightly more muted. Like, I had that sort of like frustrating thing of like my corn is a lot more muted, but I get a much better response from people for it because people like simple things about it, like the fire effects and stuff. And I was like, maybe brown is better, maybe like, and I had a very similar experience to you, I think, painting the Godsworn Hunt. I'm really pleased with how they came out, but they were a ball ache the entire time because it was just lots of like, and it's maybe partly because of the Dark Oath scheme I had settled on where it's like a lot of black leather and like fabric, like rough sort of like hemp fabrics and sort of leather and wanting that kind of like, gothy Conan feel, basically.
Yeah.
And I was kind of, I'm pleased with how they turned out, but like, having been on a real painting roll in January, they completely like slammed the brakes on all the momentum that I had. For a very similar reason. It was just like, I'd do like one stage of, leather and I'd feel like no change had taken place. And I think maybe when you're doing drab clothes, like the effect isn't complete until the whole model's complete in a really big way. Cause all you've really done is like, I've made that brown. You know what I mean? And then when the whole thing's complete, you do get the satisfaction of like, at least that looks like a person now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Once the skin's in, there's that maybe more contrast from other parts of the silver on the model or something, then the drab looks a bit less drab, or, there's context for it. But yeah, I've sort of found it annoying. And now moving on to like next tier is probably the Beastmen, but at least there are only 4 of them. Even though it's the same color palette pretty much, because it's supposed to be the same dudes that are mutated. I might put some blood for the Blood God in there and actually kind of, get something different about them in there just so there's more interest. And again, it's like the sculpts are really cool, but it's just almost the psychological effect colors have on your brain, I think is part of this as well. Cause like, that's a real thing. That's like certain colors, certain like sunlight and luminosity, and compared to, low contrast, like it has an effect on your mood. And I think actually when you're painting for a long time, for a couple of hours, just painting very low contrast drab colors puts you in a certain space that maybe painting a, beautiful gold man doesn't. And I think that is an interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about lavishing attention on a hero model, versus a whole troop of very similar colors across a lot of different models. I don't know.
I agree. That's an interesting take.
It has an interesting effect on your emotions, I think, when you're actually sitting down to do your hobby.
Yeah. My month's been relatively sparse. I just did Dark Oath and then, my Arch Warlock, partly because there's a handful of metal and fine cast models that I would like for my Scryer, so I'm doing them first because then they're done.
Yeah. Get them in the way.
But I've always really loved the Arch Warlock model. Used to be Ikit Claw, and like sort of heavily armored Skaven wizard, basically, with a robot claw.
Yeah.
And this was a bit of an exercise in, because it's a low model count army, and I'm kind of conceiving it as an army that I'm doing and then probably leaving it at that. I really want to, put the effort in and try and, not that I would necessarily like be aiming for best painted things, because I think that's a bit of it's a hard thing to aim for, but I feel like, because my Tzeentch, my first army, and my Khorne even kind of came together from sort of bits and bobs and starting for one thing and then doing another thing.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity, because it's relatively low model count, to try and do everything really coherent, pull everything together and then be done with it. You know what I mean? And sort of have something that looks really, and that particularly extends to like basing. So, in terms of stuff that, I sort of learned from doing it, one thing I've been doing is I use, I've been doing this a bit anyway, but now I'm trying to formalize it using, there's a website called Paleton, which I'll do a link to, which is basically just a color scheme generator.
Oh, cool.
And it's useful cause it's basically just, you can put in basic color and it's really easy to get, kind of Games Workshop colors because you just search for the paint name and then hex because you get the hexadecimal value for the color. So feed that in to get the basis and then you can see at a glance what a triadic color scheme would look like, maybe with a complement from that point of view. And like a triadic color scheme is usually pretty good for miniatures.
God, this is cheat code stuff. This is
good.
great.
Like color scheme generation, basically.
Yeah.
And obviously, and then you can also adjust the luminosity of like the luminosity range. So, and I've done this for a few things I'm working on, including flesh eaters. So for like flesh eaters, for example, I wanted to do and they're actually kind of similar color schemes because I like certain colors. Like I like purples and greens and blues. And you can see that across like everything I've done really. But like, so, adjusting these things allows you to kind of, you don't know how it's going to look on a model, so you do it on a model. But I found it quite helpful for like being in the right ballpark almost straight away rather than being in that situation where you just put like a random spot color on a model and you don't know why it doesn't work. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, I knew that for Skaven, the sort of, the feel I had in my head was like, almost like 80s cartoon science villain. Like, which is, for me, is like black, acid green, and then, you know, sort of like copper piping and things. And these are actually traditional Skaven colors because of warpstone and things like that. But I knew black was going to be important. So, but also this acid green, and you can kind of two birds at one stone that by, putting green as the base color basically, but setting a kind of range of the luminosity of it so that it goes from white all the way to black with like a kind of neon green in the middle, and then also applying that to the other colors in the range. So that gives you like, in terms of the complementary colors in that regard, that gives you like quite a vibrant orange, which has for me become a copper, basically Screaming Bell. Right. And quite a rich, like almost magenta, pinkish sort of mauve almost. And so like, a lot of, you see a bunch of red on Skaven, but I'm using pink instead. And it's actually kind of worked quite nicely for things like leather. And, but you can also then factor that in other areas like, tails and noses, you know, like pink rat's tails and things like, and so hanging it off all of those things, even though actually it's quite a dark model, because I want it to feel like, I've done a bit of, object source lighting as well. So the crystals and the warpstone is glowing like that, you know, and that is easier to do if the model feels like it's in the dark. You know, it's hard to have a glow effect on a well lit model, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, and also the bases I've been building are like cobbled streets that I wanted to look like ruined cobbled streets at night, basically, because I love and miss more time. So, and Skaven are very more time to me. So yeah,
I completely get that.
So it's sort of like, even despite being quite a dark model, just having like clear color contrast, just from color theory, means that it pops because that's how color theory works. Yeah. And it is cheating to, you know, but it's really helpful to be able to go and do it.
Oh, that's great. That's
Whereas
really cool.
like, for flesh eaters, I know that I want to do something a little bit, as much as color schemes, but basically I'd like to do, almost like colors of, I'm still sticking with realm of metal, so colors of like rust and decay, basically. So, it's actually a very similar color scheme because I wanted to kind of base the skin tone on nihilic oxide. Not that I would literally use nihilic oxide, but that's sort of like very pale mint color. So picked that, but then made sure the luminosity range was quite, far more pastel, like, you know, even though you wouldn't consider, you know, cannibal monsters to be very kind of pastel, like lots of pastels, but actually it is a lot paler, right? Like rotten skin and kind of decaying flesh and pallid kind of hues. And that then gives you like, a sort of mellow, tan color, and which actually works quite well for sort of rust, you know, that kind of thing. And pink, but pink in a sort of, very pale, almost lavendery pink, which actually works quite well for like, particularly rotten flesh and sort of, you know, sort of, like, not gangrened, but like, decaying extremities and things. Yeah. It's quite, you know, works quite well. Basically, so that's probably my tip is use a color wheel tool because it genuinely gives you ideas.
Well, how did you do, Edge highlight the black armor? Because I've been, one of the things I got annoyed about with the Traitor Guard was the GW recommended way of doing it was actually a series of blues that for me didn't work very well.
So I think it works with blue or grey. Yeah. But you have to pick which one you want. And it even works with bone. Like you can do like, it's like, highlighting black is the same as shading white. Whereas you shade white with blue, grey, or brown, basically, depending on what kind of white you want. And then you highlight black with the same, based on how warm or cold you want it to be.
Yeah.
The approach I've taken is kind of, I suspect for chaos stuff, I always use grey, because, I know that the heavy metal team used blue for power armor. But for me, like, unless the gradients are really, 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 really fine, it just becomes blue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I find.
Yeah. Whereas grey, it maybe becomes a bit grey, but that fits better. And, you know, it's almost dry brushable, right? Like, so for the Warlock, it's like, actually like, so I think the thing is, not being afraid to go really light with the top highlight. You know what I mean? Like, I think when I first did it, I was a bit shy about going anywhere off like a mid grey, but actually you go almost to white with the highlights, and that actually makes the black look deeper because of how bright the edge highlighting is.
If you just use grey, like a middling or low tone grey, like you lose all the detail as well. It just becomes like a smudgy effect. Whereas what I found, I really, really enjoyed painting the flamethrower, Pius. Is it Pius? What's the name?
Pius Fawn.
Pius Fawn, really enjoyed painting her because, she's got like sort of scalloped armor, lots of layers to it that you can edge highlight, which I did with like a relatively bright grey. And, I was so happy with the effect on her than I was with the guard that I did with these blues.
Yeah.
And also because it was slightly more aggressive, as you say, it was slightly brighter, and actually at a distance that defined edge really, really helps. I think the trick is like is to make it just the edge, like, and not go too far in from the edge with, sort of colors that might sort of soften the effect, if you know what I mean. Like, my instinct with edge highlighting for colors is to, edge far, like, to apply paint further away from the edge to kind of almost soften the impact of the eventual line highlight you do. Whereas for black, that's fatal because black ends up looking like the color that you soften with.
I think you can get away with it if it's quite like a thin, thick highlight, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, there's a degree to which it looks good.
It's probably a precision
The
thing,
danger zone is pretty narrow.
At least you can always go back over it with black and just kind of, you know.
Yeah, well, I would say in terms of methodology, that's how I do it. It's so for highlighting, black armor with grey, for me it's Eshin grey first, which is a little browner than Mechanicus, but Mechanicus would work as well. And actually like quite a, not messy edge highlight, but like quite a thick edge highlight. And then go back over with black and tighten that up.
Yeah.
But not loads, just tighten it up just enough. And then you can see where the problem areas are. It's like, oh, that one is actually standing out.
Yeah.
And then, an edge highlight of Dawnstone and then Administratum.
Nice.
Grey.
Do you use Administratum for like the winks, or do you do the full kind of
winks?
Edge? Yeah, I've been using Dawnstone and mixing it. I don't have Administratum. I need to get a pot, but I've been mixing Dawnstone with a bit of white, something like that. Just like get those points, you know.
Yeah. And you can do the whole edge. I tend to do, it depends on the armor. Like, I think if I want something to look sharper, I do winks rather than the whole edge. If you want something to look more like regal, you know, like, I think having little pricks of light along the edge of things and then picking out things like scratches and stuff makes it look more battered, which is appropriate for Skaven, for example.
But if you're going to do some new Primaris armor, you might go for a smoother, more difficult edge highlights.
Right.
Basically.
So it was fun. And then the other things, what else have I done? Interesting washes for metal, to make metal look interesting. I started glazing all of my silver areas on the Skaven with, glazes of, Mournfang Brown and Dark Reaper, which creates green, which is useful because they're basically, and then stippling patches of both, because, really like, not rusted iron, but like, used iron tends to go greenish, bluish, brownish. And it gives it a bit of life. I found it quite a nice kind of, quite easy way of giving some depth to a metal. And that's usually after like a 50-50 non-oil and non-oil gloss initial run. So you get this kind of...
do you edge highlight back up on, metal, for example? I find it like,
I do,
to be like, a bit touch and go for a lot of it. Like, maybe winks is the best way to go for it, but like, you could try and Agrax on lead belcher, for example, is nice. It just especially if you start, I find if you start using a second or third layer of agrax closer to the hilt or something to actually like create a bit of like shadow definition. But then I find it almost gets cartoony when I start applying some like brighter silver to the edges. As though it's almost, you know, the sharpness of that, the appearance of that edge it doesn't work with the kind of browning and stuff.
Yeah, you almost then need to like take it back down with another wash.
That's the instinct I have, but I wonder how you do that.
I think it depends on the material. Like sometimes it looks really good. Like gold looks great with a wink.
Yeah,
like gold loves a wink. Gold loves a wink.
Yeah, it can take a wink.
Yeah. Silver, like, so for blade edges and things, I think if you're going to do it, you have to commit to doing it all, which means like, probably actually blending like the way light, sort of, reflects and kind of inverts up different surfaces on a kind of, I don't know, multifaceted sword edge or something like that. Yeah. You know, you have to kind of commit to doing it properly. It's not enough to just draw a line around the various edges.
Yeah.
Cause then it just does look like you've draw
a line around.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you have to kind of actually blend up to those points and things. And that's just, it's like, it's more work and it does look better, but it doesn't look, it's like worth it for heroes, not worth it for everybody.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Whereas like, so like the Skaven Warlock's got a little kind of like rat totem, and like just picking out some of like, it would be the muscles, but like picking out some of the high points on that with just a little brighter, bit of silver, actually then for some reason makes a huge difference. And I think maybe it's an eye thing, you know, it's just like.
Yeah. That's really interesting as well. Reflective items deep in clothing or deeper in shadow, almost a brighter highlight makes more sense because that's, the reflection of sunlight or whatever environmental light is going to be condensed much tighter in that. But the bits you notice will seem more impactful and more high contrast. So, working on it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. The other thing I found is that I really, really love, basing. I just really love basing. Cool. Like, as not much of a converter, really. Don't really like converting. Find it stressful. Feel like I've broken things most of the time. Like, basing has been really, really fun. Like, bought a couple of little boxes of resin bricks from eBay and used them to make cobbled streets and things, and like, sort of, fractured cobblestones with warpstone kind of jutting out of it.
Oh, nice
stuff. And it's just really neat. It just feels, it's fun. And, I did a bizarre amount of paving, like, because I didn't want, rather than like just glue the bricks to the base, I wanted to have the potential to have an uneven surface. So I basically used milliput as mortar and like covered the base with milliput and then
so pressed
them into it. And that allows you can then like, literally roll something over an area where you need to be flat because that's where the model's going to be. But you can like tease up bricks and things and have them be slightly uneven.
Very nice. That's very modern.
And then when that's dry, just painting texture paint into the gaps where there is a visible gap. And then, I feel like, how models get that moment when you finish them and they cohere and they come together. I think for bases or probably conversions generally, the moment where you spray them and you can no longer see all the different materials you've clumped together into this thing.
Sculpt.
And it's like, oh shit, it looks good. Partly because I wanted to match the, Spikeclaw Swarm bases. Cool. It's really, really gratifying.
Oh, sweet.
So this month we're not going to do a battle report because we haven't had time to play a game with each other, but we are going to talk a bunch about games that we have played with other people that aren't each other.
Yes.
So you sound like you had a fun game with AOS recently.
Yeah, it's the first game of AOS, a proper AOS I've played for ages.
Like since
perhaps
November.
Since the event, yeah. Just simply because I've been busy. But it's been wonderful to rediscover the game. We had a great game against Chimpo's 1500 points. It's knife to the heart, so heroes. And I had a kind of an army slapped together out of Sequitors and the Wizard General that the Stormcast have, and some old favourites like Fulminators and that kind of stuff. Pretty traditional army stuff. But Chimp brought his High Elves, or as they're now known, Swift Hawk Agents, which is an army that
it does sound like project management software.
really does. Yeah.
Can you assign me a task in Swift Hawk Agent?
It takes some of the sheen off, the glamour off the High Elves, because they always used to be the smuggest, kind of most aloof, old school kind of vision of elves, and I love them for that. I think I love the old ranks of High Elves. It was wonderful to see some of those models. He fielded like a lovely army which had like 2 giant sort of Griffin Riders, and had like a couple of units of pretty old school Warhammer Fantasy Battle cavalry that like go and shoot and then dart away again, which is an old Wood Elf thing and a High Elf thing now. and also like a big unit of sword masters as well. And it just looked fucking awesome on the tabletop. It looked like a really old school, Warhammer Fantasy Battle army. And I still do miss that. Like, the thing about the kind of, the first days of AOS, now referred to as kind of the Wild West of AOS, where there was no points values and no battle line or anything. People used to just throw down the biggest monsters, and it was always the biggest monster smash. And you lost all that sense of like a well balanced army that looks awesome on the tabletop and has a variety of different things that it can do. And yeah, so I really, really enjoy playing against it. And also, it's not like terribly powerful, that army. But it does certain things very, very well. And in an objective game where they've got certain things that are very fast and disruptive, it ended up being a really closely fought affair where we were just like tentatively, fighting over 2 points. I put both my heroes on 1 point and hoped that I could just sort of stampede the other point. But what happened was, Chimp sent one of his amazing Griffin riders, and they have a 6-inch pile-in that doesn't have to target the closest thing to them. And this, Jim used this brilliantly, and it was such a good mental image because, one of the Griffins just kind of charged into my back line where my Secretors were, and my Secretors surrounded him and he just hopped over and went off to kill my archers.
Right.
Because, my archers basically existed to delete the heroes one by one, and that's what they started doing. The first thing they did, as you've experienced, like, this is what Stormcast shooting does, they target like mid-level heroes that are linchpins of armies, and they're very good at getting rid of them. So in like the first turn or so, like I managed to get rid of his mage that had gotten onto 1 point just by shooting it. And my plan was basically just shoot everything off while sort of blockading stuff with very tough Stormcast units that, the High Elves couldn't really shift. They didn't really have the mortal wound output or the killing power to get through Stormcast. And so, but what kind of ended up, making it so competitive was that, Jim had this Griffin in the back line, that could hop from unit to unit. And, as you rightly pointed out afterwards, I should have like retreated away from that thing so it couldn't keep doing that.
Yeah, right.
But it ended up hopping.
Just bouncing around.
Just bouncing around the back unit. But the mental image of that is perfect. That's what like a giant flying monster is supposed to do. Is come in and squashes something, distracts them, then leaps up and then crashes down somewhere else and just like sends everything to disarray.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened in this game. And he did a brilliant job of so he got out of the Secretors and went into the archers and then hopped from one unit of the archers to the other. And with the large base managed to occupy both units of archers. And this is where AOS 2's rules are great because those archers are then engaged with that beast and they can't shoot anything else.
Yeah.
So it was like a kind of defensive sort of Griffin attack, but defense through offense, which is a great way to use cool, fragile, high elf monsters. But it was still really close. And the other thing he did very well was that he positioned his other Griffin right behind a building in a way that was very, very awkward to get to. And this is a big deal in AOS. Like, if you can make a thing just awkward to charge with a full number of models that your opponent would hope to get in, like if you just watch the base against a piece of scenery in a way that will just deny a load of attacks, that's actually a completely viable strategy. Like, it's a very good tactic because, I ended up bringing on my Paladors in pursuit and they could come on from any table edge and, start trying to mess up the back line. I brought them in at the end to try and get in and kill the one hero he had on his point. And I could only get 2 of them in. And then when the Secretors charged, I could only get like a few heavy weapons and like a couple of normal guys in. No one else could actually get in because they've got large bases and they're fighting in this awkward, piece of terrain. It came down to the crunch where I just needed to kill this one hero and I'd probably win. But if it's 5, then it was an automatic victory to Chimp. And, I got the monster down to 1 wound, but couldn't quite kill it. And then Chimp took the victory off the back of that. And the fact that I could only charge 2 of the 3 Paladors and get them into base contact, I could only get 4 or 5 Secretors in. Like, all that maths really, really matters when it comes to crunch points in AOS. And this is constantly happens where, in scenario play, there are clutch moments where you just need to get something off, where you need to kill something.
Yeah.
And I think my strategy was good. So broadly, I planned to shoot off all the heroes. And, the Secretors did have a round of full on attacks against the Griffin that ended up being so disruptive and they just whiffed it. And they only did like 1 or 2, points damage. And, I poured loads of shooting into that Griffin to try and stop it from disrupting my backlines, but it just stuck around. But I just thought it was an awesome, 1500s is a great space for AOS because it plays quickly as well.
Yeah.
It's not too much. We're on a smaller board, so 1500 points isn't too much for the smaller board we're on. And it was just a really, really fun game. It was super, super good. And those two armies were just nicely balanced against each other in the sense that they were all about movement and charges and contact and maneuvering, positioning. And again, I keep on saying this, that's what I love about war games. Like, I want where my guys are on the thing and the way they're moving to actually really affect things rather than dice rolls so much.
Yeah.
I like dice rolls to, create a degree of unexpected consequence, but broadly I like good tactical decisions to be rewarded. And, AOS has an interesting relationship with that because some armies, are very variable and you can make good tactical decisions and get blown up. And other armies are very consistent. And it's interesting that to play an old Warhammer Fantasy Battle army that is basically like a legacy thing now. Like it's not really a supported rule set so much. But to play against an army that played quite consistently in a really fun way.
Yeah.
It was really nice actually. And, really, really had a great time. It was good.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I had a really, really good time playing on Sunday actually. It was nice to, despite the flaws we've talked about, so for clarity, I went to a 1,000-point 4-game Age of Sigmar tournament. The same one we went to last year.
Oh, that's
big.
Big.
But a very similar experience of like having I think, so the feeling for me was like, for the first time in a while actually, feeling like I was properly using all of the rules of AOS and kind of like, fully understanding everything that was going on. And maybe that's a testament to the fact that I never know what's going on. But you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of the benefit of like, there is a cool sort of strategy game here and it can definitely be abused at the fringes. But, I felt like because, I went in with a more interesting army than I think I've had previously. I had a more interesting day of games as a consequence. So the army I took just so for help was, the Curseling General. So the Dispelling Anti-Wizard, with, and like with a fairly decent, meta combo, I guess, which is this, Tzeentch command trait called Arcane Sacrifice that allows me to deal 3 mortal wounds to one of my own units in return for, rerolls to cast and plus 9-inch spell range for the general until my next hero phase. And this is really, really good because it allows you to hurt your own pink horrors in your backline when nothing can really hurt them and then battle shock them above their original unit size while also earning blue horror points from killing them. So while technically a unit of 10 pink horrors should only ever turn into like 20 blue horrors, I was reliably getting a lot more than that out of them, like getting more pinks, then killing those pinks and those pinks dying and then getting more blue points. So you create this kind of exponential horror factory while also giving yourself a good casting. The Magister, who's the little weirdly spindly chicken weirdo that turns people into spawn, and the Zangor Shaman, who is rapidly becoming my favorite Tzeentch hero, flying wizard with great movement speed and the ability to turn things into Zangor, which is very good.
Yeah.
Then a unit of 10 Zangor, which once upon a time would have been bad and is now pretty solid as a, battle line unit.
Good.
And they're really interesting. Past me is delighted to find out that they're viable in units of 10. having painted 30 of them. Yeah. 10 pink horrors, again, battle line, but also expensive, but, a good strategic kind of unit, great tar pit. And a unit of 3 Zangor Enlightened, who are very, very good now and possibly a little bit undercosted, but very, very fighty. And it was fun for me to have. So I gave my general Bolt of Tzeentch, which is one that does D6 mortal wounds on an 8 because he gets rerolls from stuff.
Yeah.
But other than that, all of my damage spells, like almost everyone had access to a D3 mortal wounds damage spell or arcane bolt, but there was no mortal wound output higher than that in the army. Which is kind of different for me, right? There's nothing that just explodes. There's I had the ability to do a bunch of mortal wounds, but, I could tell immediately that the feel of being peppered with a bunch of D3 mortal wound spells is just different to being like, I've just done, like the Gaunt Summoner anti-horde spell being like, I've just done 20 mortal wounds to this unit of 40 skeletons. And we're going, what? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then when, that burns both ways as well. It's like, well, I expected this to do, I rolled so many dice and I've only done 5 mortal wounds and that breaks bad both ways, doesn't it?
It does.
Potentially.
And the other thing I did was before the event, cause it had been a while, cause I hadn't really properly played since, we played Skirmish, but I hadn't really properly played since, November either. One thing I found recently while doing pen and paper role playing is, revision cards for just remembering key stats for people.
Yeah.
So I thought what I would do, and I got it here, is I made myself a 2-sided revision card for that army. And on one side, and because this is a fucking Tzeentch army, this side that I'll show you, Tom, which is covered in text, is the hero phase. This is every other phase.
That makes complete
which has almost
sense.
nothing on it.
having faced this army, that makes...
But also almost no shooting in that army as well. The only shooting unit was the pink horrors.
Yeah.
And any subsequent horrors that appear. But I did bring my crusade case with like everything in it, apart from the Lord of Change. Like, so I could have all the summoning,
pools.
which is actually really fun because it's like the toy box basically. And I had a really, really good time, and I'll sort of skip to the end in the sense of the result. I ended up coming 4th, which is my best result in a AOS tournament.
Yeah,
ever.
nice.
So not enough to make the top 3 and the sort of the, prize pools, but actually like genuinely my best result. So that feels good.
Yeah, that's nice.
So I wanted to quickly run through the games because, just like key moments, because I think I learned cool things about my army and also AOS generally in each one. So the first game was Star Strike, which is one where the objectives come down randomly against Flesh Eater Courts. And this was against the army that would ultimately win the whole tournament. So that army was 2 Archregents. So, doing the Charnel Throne thing. So immediately pulling in an extra 400 points of stuff on the first turn.
Yeah.
A Ghoul King on Terrorgeist and 2 minimum strength units of ghouls for Battle Line. And it was a really interesting game, partly because he gave himself the first turn. I think because he was afraid of me maybe ambushing his throne or something. There's actually no way I could have done that, but I took the first turn to get his summoning and summoned 2 units of Crypt Flayers, so the flying, screaming Batmen, either side of my army. And I have so much experience screening for things from space that I had screened quite effectively so that there was not really anywhere he could go. And actually his shooting, because Flesh Eater Court's shooting is yelling and it's based on beating your bravery.
Yeah.
The only things he had to shoot were pink horrors on one side who don't give a shit because they're bravery
demons.
10.
Yeah.
And the other were, Zangor, who I had put in some inspiring terrain. So they were actually really hard to hurt with it as well.
Yeah.
So I lost like a Zangor to the shooting. But then, what was sort of surprising was, so the Flayers on one flank got like a 12-inch charge and managed to just go leapfrog the Zangor and go straight for the Zangor Shaman. At which point, the Zangor Shaman, setting out to be like the MVP basically for the entire day, killed 2 of them in combat. And they're 4 wound models.
Wow.
And he's a wizard on a frisbee.
Amazing.
Killed 2 of them in combat. And then in my first hero phase, killed the other one with the spell that turns things into Zangor and returned the Zangor that they'd killed. So his free summoning points actually ended up doing absolutely nothing. And then on my turn, the Enlightened completely annihilated the other unit of, Flayers. Because Enlightened, so the Enlightened are also really, really good. And there's a big strategy in if they fight second, they get full rerolls. So on hit and wound.
Yeah, very good.
Which is very good. But obviously you're gambling against, and I really like that strategically because you have to gamble against how much damage am I going to take? Sometimes you just cannot go, you have to fight first because they might just die.
Yeah.
But when you can gamble on it, it's great. They also get +1 to hit if they're within 12 inches of a shaman. So moving the shaman to like buff them for a turn and having to position the shaman, not just so that they're a foot away, but so that they are fully within, because it's wholly within 12 inches. So they're wholly within after the pile-in is like, I think, genuine skill AOS.
Yes,
you know what I mean? It's
definitely.
like,
It's reading the game a step ahead, isn't it?
yeah. And that I found that very rewarding. Like that was something I think I managed to consistently get right over the course of the day and it made a huge difference. Like I would always put the shaman so that it was where the bubble was like where I think the fight's going to be. And that's like a big, that felt like a bit of a level up in my own brain in terms of like, and that actually came from having spent the time the night before to write down the rules on a card.
Yeah.
And like really properly like have that awareness of what was going on. The other example in this game is, so, I got a double turn, because he'd given me the first turn and he'd also parked his Ghoul King on Terrorgeist in front of me, like right in front of me. And hadn't, cause he'd given it a spell that let it run and charge, but he hadn't managed to, but it was like an 11-inch charge even after running and flying across the middle of the board and he hadn't made it.
Yeah.
So he parked it in front of me and done the thing that you don't do against Tzeentch, which is park in front of Tzeentch for a double turn. And so I threw everything at it, but I was also managed to not forget things like the Zangor Banner, which fires mortal wounds when it's surrounded by wizards.
Yeah.
And over the course of my, first turn, I wasn't able to charge it in my first turn because I was dealing with the Crypt Flayers. But on my second turn, I was in a position to not only charge it, but keep peppering it with shooting, mortal wounds. I'd lost a bunch of flayers. I lost a bunch of pink horrors to the flayers, but that allowed me to pull up a unit of 10 blue horrors out of nowhere and have them throwing 4-up shooting attacks at the Terrorgeist. And because I'd managed to unbind a spell that gives it an even better invulnerable save, I managed to get it to 4 wounds remaining going into the combat phase, and it still hadn't used its once per game summoning ability. So killing it is huge, particularly killing it before it got into combat. And then I summoned some screamers and but then everything in my army, including the Zangor, except the Enlightened failed their charge into the Terrorgeist. So it was just on the Enlightened to kill the Terrorgeist by himself. They did shitloads of damage, but the Terrorgeist it has a 6-up invulnerable save, and it was also stood on mystical terrain, which gives it another 6-up invulnerable save. And he managed to, and this is just one of those moments, dice moments, just managed to get, I think it was 4 6s in the last pile of wounds. So the Terrorgeist survived on 2 wounds remaining, and then killed half my army in a single turn.
Right.
Like just absolutely, spell to give it its full, fight as if it's got its full wound complement, just mortal wounds, dead. At which point the objective comes down and neither of us are holding it, at which point the game ends. So it was a draw. Yeah, and it was a weird one because my opponent
kill
said,
points, is it?
Nope. Just straight up draw. Because it's 0-0 draw because neither of us had any points. So
It's just a total fight.
it was just a total fight. And my opponent said he was going to concede if I'd killed the Terrorgeist, so it was really, really close. And he would go on to win the entire thing. So it was
wow.
sort of fought to a standstill, but then, an interesting one because it was but nonetheless, it was sort of like an exercise in setting that stuff up, right? The second game, which was really, an interesting one, was against Idneth, who I'd only played once before. And, sorts of things you'd expect. Achillean King, I know Volturnus, the named Achillean King.
Yeah.
One massive unit of eels, one smaller unit of eels.
Yeah, those eels.
Reavers for objectives and a wizard.
Yeah.
Hilariously, we had a table really, really packed with urban terrain, like fantasy, ruined buildings and things. And I was using my, scenery dice, and there were 11 pieces of terrain on the board, and I rolled arcane for 7 of them. It was magic as fuck.
Yeah, nice.
Here's my playground, and I felt very good about it. He gave me the first turn, so I holed up because I'm just I'm not letting you, eel strike me, straight away. And it was an interesting game of the whole model. Basically, this is the one I lost. And it ended up being a game that was not close on points in the end. I can't remember exactly where it came down. It was 10-4 to him. I can't remember exactly what objective it was. It was one of the relatively straightforward ones. But the issue was, that, it was actually close until the end, and then it kind of completely collapsed. And the reason for that was every turn roll went completely perfectly for the Idneth player. And that's not to discount the strategy, because he knew that he was gambling on that. So he gave me the first turn and then rushed all the eels forwards.
What's the second turn?
And then if he doesn't get a double turn at that point, he's boned. It's a huge risk because, one, I'm statistically more likely to get the turn because of winning draws.
Yes.
But also he had parked all his eels in front of me. Again, the problem of don't park in front of the Zinch kind of wizard line. Yeah. Particularly because I'd taken no casualties. But then he got the double turn, and the second turn for Idneth is the one where they can run and charge based on the tide. And then, suddenly his run rolls were on fire. So, he was doing a 20-inch move with the eels and then charging. And so suddenly my kind of little turtle position and trying to use terrain and things didn't matter at all because he can fly. So he was just positioning perfectly to completely box me in. So I was never going to get out of that box for the rest of the game, basically. And then took a bunch of casualties. Then on my turn, I managed to fight back and actually do a decent amount of damage and break out. And, I did a fun thing, which was flinging the shaman away from the fight and then summoning blue horrors onto one of his backfield objectives to suddenly start getting points and getting back into the game.
Yeah.
And and he had nothing in his backfield. It was the one where you get more points for, no, it wasn't the one where you get more points for things in your opponent's backfield. It's the one where you get more points for taking them back off your opponent. Because he had on the first turn capped all his own objectives. Right. And then rushed me. And then because he'd done that, the shaman just, again, being a huge player, went to the back and started flinging demons onto the points, which would have got me back into the game. But then, he won initiative back again. Because if it had gone into a double turn for me then, again, I'm back in the game.
Loads of points.
But then it went back into him, and the third turn for Ideneth is the one where they always fight first in the combat phase.
Right. So they just
So in the third one, he then just set up all these things and then annihilated every single one of my heroes before anything of mine could fight back.
Yeah. That's rough.
And then just mashed me, basically. So
Yeah.
it was just one of those games where it's like, it was fun. It was a fun game, but it was like, you know, I needed a break from in either of those two moments.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with variable initiative in AOS. It's like, it can go wrong for you once, but you have to have planned spectacularly far ahead to be able to have it go wrong for you twice. And I think, and coupled with the Ideneth allegiance ability that makes them so powerful at certain turns, like, when that couples with getting exactly the right initiative, it's really hard to do anything about.
It's very rough.
Yeah. So the third game was an interesting one because it was Duality of Death, which is the one where only heroes can hold objectives. Tzeentch versus Beastclaw Raiders.
Ooh.
So this is an interesting kind of thing.
Yeah.
Beautifully painted Beastclaw Raiders army, beautifully based, with two heroes, Frostlord on Stonehorn, two, big mammoth dude, two big units of Mournfangs. So, I don't know, bull riders. I don't know, big Highland cow riders. I don't really know what they're riding, to be honest. And a allied butcher, which is one of the, I think the Gutbuster wizards.
Oh, cool.
So we had two heroes, which is more than you might normally get in a
1,000 points.
1,000 point Beastclaw army. And I was actually really, really, really scared of it. And it's an interesting example of, I think, how things can feel versus go in AOS because, he took the first turn and ran at me. And I had spread out a little bit. But, you know, the scary Beastclaw thing for Tzeentch, particularly in a game like this where only heroes can hold objectives, is the Frostlord, his shooting attack, 18-inch range, on a 2-up, it does 6 mortal wounds. Which means on a 2-up, all of my heroes are dead. Or a hero is dead. Just pick one. It's dead. So he ran at me, picked the Curseling, and removed the Curseling. And just gone. And that kind of sucks, because it's my most durable hero, and now I'm down to 2 heroes that can hold objectives, so we're equalized, and my heroes are definitely not equal to his heroes in terms of durability, wounds, and so on. But, and this is maybe the story for the day, actually, I don't think this was actually even a double turn scenario. I just managed to kill the Frostlord in a single turn. And it wasn't spells did a bunch, but what was really impressive was I basically had a perfect combat phase where I got the Zangor enlightened into the Frostlord's flank, and then the on-foot Zangor spread between the front of the Frostlord and the Mournfang, the sort of the leading edge of the Mournfang, because they couldn't all get in, because those were some big bases.
Yeah.
And there are only 2 Zangor in base-to-base contact with the Frostlord, the leader and just a regular great weapon guy. And the regular great weapon guy managed to kill the Frostlord by himself.
Wow. Great job.
I know, good job.
Promotion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That guy. But what that meant is the Unlightened didn't have to fight him. And so then he activated his Mournfang and piled them into the Zangor. They couldn't pile in far enough to get into the Enlightened because they're already tagged by the Zangor. So they pile into the Zangor, fight the Zangor, kill 5 of them. But then this is the perfect scenario for the Enlightened because they've taken no damage whatsoever.
Okay, second.
And the unit they're fighting has just fought. And so they pile into the Mournfang and kill all of them.
Nice.
They kill a full unit of 4 Mournfang, which is I don't know, they're 6 wounds each or something. They just ripped them to pieces. It was nuts.
This cow on cow violence is quite stressing.
Yeah, bird cow versus, man cow violence. Yeah, but at that point, the game was basically over. I've never really done a tabling before, but it was I'd killed the Frostlord. He only had 2 Mournfangs and a wizard left.
Yeah, it's weird because it sounds like the army you faced was actually quite a high model count for a Beastclaw Raiders army, but even then it sounds like they didn't have much. Again, it's that 1,000 points thing. Some armies just very vulnerable just to taking losses in that situation.
But it was a really interesting matchup because, because I think we both had reasons to be afraid of each other. He kind of wants this general out in front because if he does that shooting attack a couple of times to my heroes, I've lost the game. There's nothing I can do.
You can't capture anything. Yeah.
And also, as I start taking damage, something I came to understand, particularly in the Ideneth game, was so Enlightened love their buffs. They love having the Zangor Shaman nearby. They love getting to fight second, but they're pretty good anyway.
Yeah.
They're pretty good anyway. But Zangor suck without the buffs. They really, really want a hero nearby. They really want to have more than 9 models. So they start out pretty good, and 10 is KG for them because they want to have more than 9. So 2 casualties and there's every model loses an attack, which sucks. So, Zangor, I feel like with 10 of them, you get good value out of them once, maybe. And if they get shot or something like that, then
suddenly, yeah, especially with just 10 of them, like.
Yeah. So they fade fast in terms of how useful they are. And I sort of learned this over the course of the game. And, in that one, it was a case of like what happens when they do get their buffs. They get to fight first. They get to get one good turn out and then they win the game for you. But against the Ideneth, for example, they took a bunch of, because, the Morsar Guard do mortal wounds, the eels do mortal wounds when they charge. That killed like 3 Zangor off the bat. So they were, and that happens at the start of the combat phase, so it doesn't really matter about initiative or anything. It's just like, oh, well, shit. So that was a big learning. So the third game was a really, really fun one, and it was against Sylvaneth, and
cool.
And so it was a Sylvaneth army, which was Dryka, so the named Tree Lord, Tree Lady, I guess, who is a horrible combat monster.
Full of bees.
She's full of bees, and she's angry and ready to impale people.
Yeah. She's got literal mood mechanic where you roll for whether she's in a vengeful mood or a sorrowful mood. And
My opponent did not do that.
They missed. I think that's Striker, but I might be
maybe. Yeah, a unit of 6 Kurnoth hunters with scythes.
Nice.
That is a horrible topic. 'Cause that's 30 wounds worth of just tree man you don't want to deal with.
They could dig in as well with they could lay roots while they're in combat and get extra defenses. They're very good.
And then a branch witch or a branch wraith, whichever one it is, that summons, and 2 units of 5 spite revenants for battle line.
Spite revenants, interesting.
Yeah. And it was the objective, it was total, conquest, I think, which is the one where you, it's 1 point for each objective you're holding in your own territory and 3 points for the objectives you're holding in your opponent's territory. And immediately you start the game, massive, like, board-spanning block of wildwoods right in the middle of the board.
Yeah.
Right in my face. And so I knew from the start that, like, this is where
the Kurnoths
the Kurnoths and the Tree Lord are coming from.
Yes.
And opponent took the first turn, and I did something, previously in most games I had bunched up to kind of like, take advantage of all the synergies and stuff like that. In this one, I split up and had the Curseling and Pink Horrors on one objective, and then everyone else kind of like hanging out on the other one, like the Magister and stuff, just standing, as far away from the objective as possible while still capping it, with the sort of the Shaman and the Zangor and the Enlightened kind of together, because they're all bird friends. And the idea was, the plan, and this was the plan, was whichever way the Tree Lord and basically try and encourage the Tree Lord, the Dryka and the Kurnoths to go in the same direction. Because I figure over the course of the entire game, I'm probably going to kill one of them, but not both. Because killing 30 wounds worth of Kurnoths is just impossible for me. I think it's just not going to happen. 12 wounds worth of Dryka is more possible. But it's like, if they commit in the same direction, I can tar pit them in that direction, and I'll lose that objective, but I won't lose both. If they split up, I'll probably lose the game, because it'll take me so long to shift that they'll be scoring 3 points from, each side kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they went for the Curseling, partly because explaining what the Curseling does to people makes him sound really scary. So Dryka goes for the Curseling, annihilates him immediately. And this is a common theme. Like, some people just kill the Curseling straight away, and then get stuck into Pink Horrors that just refuse to fucking move. And then in my turn, I basically, it was a really awkward terrain situation, but I just charged, because Zangor could run and charge. Basically, it was one of the situations where you can't get the charge you want, so you can't get everyone in. But I managed to create a kind of thin layer of Zangor behind Dryka and between Dryka and the Kurnoth hunters. And it was sort of bait, and used Inspiring Presence to keep them around and just have this block of them there. And then the Kurnoth hunters charge into the Zangor, and this basically creates a daisy chain where the Pink Horrors are the ones holding my objective, and then turning into blue horrors. And, the Zangor Shaman's there throwing out blue horrors and making sure I'm holding this objective where my opponent's army is wholly committed to that objective, but he just doesn't have the numbers to take it. And then eventually Dryka got dragged down by Pink Horrors in combat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
It took a long time, but it took a couple of turns. And at that point the Kurnoth started wading through, finally annihilating the the Zangor, you know, finally getting into the pink horrors and probably doing some damage to them. But at this point, his whole army had been committed to this direction for the whole game. Meanwhile, I sent the Enlightened alone, so just accepting the fact that they sometimes don't care about their buffs. They took a turn to get into the middle of the board, then another turn to get all the way into my opponent's side, wiped out 5 Spike Revenants, took a backfield objective that my opponent then didn't have anything to take back, and I'm getting 3 points a turn from it. He summons 10 Dryads to try and shift the Enlightened, but the Enlightened just move away, so they're going to be out of range. Then he sends the Dryads through the Wildwoods into my territory to try and take my objectives. Yeah. At which point, my Enlightened are then free to go into his back line and take his other backfield objective. So the Enlightened are just in his backfield killing Spike Revenants and taking names. But while this is happening, the Kurnoth Hunters completely just wreck face. They annihilate the Zangor Shaman, they kill all the pink horrors, and we get to a turn where my opponent was ahead on points, because he had taken some of my backfield objectives by now. It took me a while to get into position in the back. And the only models I have left are the Magister and 2 Enlightened. And then this was the start of his turn. And then the Dryads make an 11-inch charge and get into the Magister. So the Magister is completely surrounded by Dryads. And in a previous turn, he had nothing to cast, and there was no reason for him to cast anything. But for the sake of a fate point, I cast Shield of Fate. And I put it on him because he was the only thing in range. And it happened to be still my hero phase, and he got double turn. And this happened. And that Shield of Fate meant the Magister only took a single wound.
Right.
Then in the following turn, the Magister who had done nothing all tournament basically, bolts of changes one of the Dryads, turns him into a Chaos Spawn. Then summons 2 units of Blue Horrors and a unit of Brimstone Horrors. Then the Chaos Spawn annihilates the Dryads in combat, basically. Yeah. But not before the Blue Horrors make a charge in, which means the objective goes back to me. And yeah, the Zangor Enlightened in the back make this charge. And it was this amazing switch amazing for me, but like switch of fortune where it goes from like, I've got 3 models left and I'm basically boned to I've got 30 models on the board now and I've just taken everything. And it ended up being, I think, 23-16 or something. Wow. It was really cool. Really high scoring game and really, really fun ending. But yeah, really rad. And that was my day, basically.
A nice variety of armies you faced. It's not so much the army you take. It does sound like you took a more of a fun army. Enlightened or a mobile, close combat fighting force. That's something that you, in my experience playing against you, you've never really had very much. And like, it is really fun to play with it. That's why I love Fulminators and stuff like that, because it's really fun to have like something that you know can get stuff done. And prioritizing their movement and positioning them correctly for the right moment in the game is one of the most satisfying things in AOS for me, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I don't think I've ever had a unit. I've had units that are good at stuff, but never a unit that just holds the line.
Brutally, either tank stuff or kill stuff, has a role on the battlefield. The stuff that kills stuff in AOS is really fun. Fast moving that's why eels are so coveted in, Idoneth forces, because they're really mobile and they destroy stuff. And like, that's the most fun unit to use. And that's why I love using the plague drone in 40k and stuff like that, because if you get it into the right position, it does terrible damage. And that's a fun challenge. That's what I kind of dislike about shooting as well. Like, cause shooting does lack that. It's one of the reasons why I don't play 40k very much, it's more that I don't have a massive interest in getting into 40k after playing with the starter set, because playing with Primaris and just being, these ranges overlap, so now I get to roll X amount of dice isn't as interesting as a charge or something, appearing summoning in the backfield or some sort of cool trick that you've done strategically. I
agree. I think, shooting particularly, like, I liked how much shooting this army had, because it does play a role, and but it's quite easy to remember. It's always just like a 4-up, and it's just from the horrors, and like, it adds an extra dimension to, summoning the horrors, like summoning them into like this kind of, to create these like shooting solutions to try and take extra wounds off stuff. But it feels like being in an army where like the purpose of ranged damage, both spells and shooting attacks, was simply to create like the way I always think about it is like, I don't know, we both play action games. Like, you know, when like an enemy health bar is in like execute range, it feels like I got a sense for what the execute range of Zangor and Zangor Enlightened are, and they are usually the ones that are actually doing the killing. It's like the purpose of all the shooting and the magic and stuff is to like...
It's always chip damage that gets them into the kill
it's
zone,
like,
basically, yeah.
Yeah, like the kill zone for this Terrorgeist, it really should have been 4 wounds left, to be honest, but it, you know, like, I can't account for like magic, you know, death saves when they happen.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, that's, you know, this is the kill zone, now I commit, rather than just hoping it'll happen. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the purpose of it. Whereas I think my experience with Zinch in the past when I've won has been, I've done so much damage, there's no longer a game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, and that, you know, requires some setting up as well. Like,
yeah, sure.
But,
Synergies, and it requires you to protect certain aspects of the army to make the combo work for big spells, etc.
And you have to target the right thing and so on. But
there's skill to that, but it's just a different type of experience for both players. I think like, one approach is more rewarding for both players than the other. And that's an interesting part of AOS and any war games design really.
Yeah, I mean, and similarly though, you have the experience where like when things do go wholly against you, there's sometimes just not a lot you can do, right?
Yeah,
like
for
I
sure.
sort of accepted that in the Ideneth game that it was like, what do you do in that situation? Like I always try and think of it in terms of what decision could I have made differently. And in that one, I genuinely wasn't sure because it's like, you know, obviously I don't have any control over, I think maybe the decision would have been list building stage, having one fewer unit. Like if I had more of the models, I could have ditched the Magister, even though he saved me in the end. And I had, a double the size unit of Enlightened, which would mean that I had one fewer drop as well, which would have meant I had the choice over first turn more often. Like those are the kinds of things I could take away from it. But still.
It's before you start playing, right? That's
yeah.
the thing.
You can
different
never
type
know,
of
right?
decision making.
But yeah. So yeah, fun games of Warhammer is good.
It is good.
Like to play.
Yes.
It's nice. Should we do some questions?
Let's
and
do
then
it.
Go home. Our first question comes from Paul, who writes, yesterday I made my annual trip to the Beachhead Wargames convention in Bournemouth. While there I completed my annual ritual of holding a copy of Warhammer Underworlds in my hands, umming and ahhing for 20 minutes and then not buying it. As a glacially slow painter, I love the idea of a small-scale strategic game played with only a handful of miniatures. And listening to you guys eulogizing about it on the podcast has made me really excited about trying it out. However, as a glacially slow painter, I felt like I had dodged a bullet when Shadespire split by Nightfall quicker than I would have been able to finish painting the contents of Shadespire if I had bought it. I've toyed with the idea of not just picking up and painting a warband and painting it, but shied away with the thought that I'd still need the main box game to play. So my question is, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in getting started with Warhammer Underworlds, but is worried about being left behind by the pace of edition changes? Thanks for the critical hits, Paul.
Yeah, I feel this anxiety as well. And I know I just don't have the time to keep up with Shadespire, especially like it's moved at such a clip from the first season. Like more so than I would be able to deal with. And I don't have like a regular playing group. I kind of could find one for sure between, you, Chris, and people at GW or whatever, if you want to turn up on days. But I wouldn't have the time to intellectually, just mentally keep up with what new cards were in rotation, how things had shifted, what stuff does. And that's even before you think about the painting challenge as the sort of the questioner asks. So I do feel like for me, the pace of Shadespire is too fast, but then these games are tuned to the most engaged fans, and I suspect the most engaged fans do want that pace of update to keep the game fresh.
I think the flip side to that is it depends who you are playing with, and you can get plenty of decent games out of the core box.
You can,
with
for
the
sure.
Bits that are in it.
Yeah.
Similarly, I mean, obviously it depends on how you feel about playing with unpainted models, but because the models are on colored plastic, for me it feels a lot different. Like I don't like playing, I don't like playing with grey plastic, but actually Underworld warbands I don't really mind. They just feel like game pieces to me.
Yeah, sure.
So I feel like you could, I mean, God knows, like I've got far more unpainted Underworld warbands than painted ones. I tend to paint the ones I actually play with and have the cards and things, but yeah, like, I think accepting that playing with unpainted models is okay is one way of going with it. And the other is that simply the core set by itself will give you, you know, a decent amount of fun depending on how frequently you play. And, you know, cause there is both sort of starter decks in there and then also freedom to start making your own decks. And the game itself is actually pretty substantially systemically diverse. So, you know, there is stuff to learn and dig into depending on how often you play and so on.
Yeah. Like it's really, really, really good out of the box for this type of game compared to X-Wing, which is an amazing game in its own right. But like Shadespire is much, much better value in terms of the type of games you'll get and the depth of games you'll get, and the fact that it gives you a gateway into deck building if you want it. The box is super, super good. So it's nice thing to have the box and play with it if you have people you can play with regularly, because I think that will be rewarding in a game sense. Yeah. But yeah, if you plan to paint everything, there's a lot of releases, a lot to keep up with. Yeah,
there are. Also just paint what you feel like painting and then change your mind all the time. That's what I do.
Yeah. It's the new way.
Jams writes, hello mini men. GW are getting wild with their sprue colours. Oh, speaking of coloured plastic.
Yeah.
Zarbag's Gits have a butterscotch. Mollog's Mob are some kind of delicious lavender flavour ice cream treat. What flavours are the other GW sprue colours? And which is the tastiest? Warmest regards, Jams. So, what does grey sprue, like default GW?
The basic one.
What does that taste like? Ash, maybe. Yeah, ash. Graphite, like pencil graphite.
Yeah.
KFC.
I like KFC though.
Oh yeah, maybe. No, not KFC. I think,
let's not be cruel on KFC here.
No.
Yeah.
No, we want to chase that sponsorship.
Absolutely.
What's this? I think that the Stormcast Gold, I think that's like a Ferrero Rocher. I want it to be a Ferrero Rocher, Tom.
Pyrite. Just,
what does pyrite taste like, Tom?
Poisonous, because it reacts very badly with water, if I remember rightly.
Okay. Not that then. I'm not going to eat that. I think there's a few good minty ghosts.
Yeah, minty ghost is nice. A nice, After Eight, Night Haunt.
I feel like the Fire Slayer orange plastic, you should be able to like lick it like a gobstopper and it would be very tangy.
Yeah,
like orangey sort
I'm torn between that and just what's it. Cause it's,
actually, you're right.
Just like this luminous, cheesy chemical taste.
It's a cheesy dwarf.
It's a cheesy chemical dwarf. Yeah, very much.
Maybe the sort of the strawberry red corn. You know what I mean?
Yeah, strawberry is a go-to for that. It's a very
blueberry Stormcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The shades by a Stormcast tend to come in blue, don't they? They tend to come in that kind of, what is blueberry really though? It's not a real flavour. No,
it's like fake strawberry, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a different thing. Like, yeah. I mean, that's the eternal conflict between fake blueberry and fake strawberry.
Yeah.
What other, there's the sort of the turquoise, that they've done for some Tzeentch stuff and some terrain stuff. And some of the endless spells. I feel like, I'm trying to figure out what that would be. Cause that's like,
I've not seen those.
There's some on that shelf up there. Might be able to see them from the angle you're sitting at. The Eyes of the Nine come in those colours.
Oh, the Shades by Terrain, perhaps.
The Shades by Terrain, I think, is actually sort of in that region, though. Yeah, it's that sort of like pale blue that, I don't know if that has a correlation in terms of flavour.
No, it's definitely, I mean.
It's the wrapping, it's coconut flavour. It's the wrapping of a coconut, yeah.
It's like,
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, blue's a terrible colour for food, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Food should
We're pretty trained not to eat that, yeah. Good question, though. Getting to the heart of it. I mean, again, as with, any given miniatures thing, I'm just minutes from putting any of it in my mouth. Drew writes, hello, crystal plains of Hyish and stomp-battered mountains of Gur.
Ooh, thank you very much.
A comment on the Discord really made me think. Tzeentch very much embodies the life-affirming phrase, be the change you want to see.
It does.
It had me thinking, what other positive messages do AOS or 40k factions promote? Nurgle seems like an easy, low-hanging fruit, and Tower too easy, but what other good ones are out there? Keep podding the good pods, Drew. I don't really feel like, just to go back a moment, I think it's a good question, but be the change you want to see in the world isn't 100% Tzeentch's deal. Because often it's like, the change I want to see in the world is, I'm king now. But the change that has happened is, I'm made of feathers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you don't always get to be the change you want to see in the world.
Be the change you're told to be by a magic bird.
Be the change you want to see in the world as long as that's a fish tentacle.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. It's like, he's like the Henry Ford of fish tentacles. Like,
they didn't know they wanted it.
Yeah. I feel like, the Necrons have a very positive message. Which is, if things get tough, go to sleep.
for
a long time.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
That's very good.
I quite like that.
Hibernate.
Just, hey.
If in doubt.
Is the galaxy filling with elves? It's time to sleep. Time to go to sleep.
Yeah, I feel like the reverse of this, like the worst ones are probably the Eldar, like the Inari. Like it is just acceptance of your eventual demise, which is pretty old.
I think the message of the Eldar is stop wanking.
That's very true as well.
For heaven's sake, stop it! Oh no! Bang!
But after the wanking thing, though, they go to deep regret, and it's just like their whole
shame.
Just shame is eternal.
Profound,
shame.
yeah.
Eternal shame.
Yeah, that's the message of the Eldar. I feel like the 40k factions are always more fun to do this with in some ways.
I guess they're a bit more developed, a bit more complicated in some ways. Like, I don't find anything inspiring about the Stormcast, really, in many ways.
No, but I was trying to think, I don't really find that, there's not really like an inspiring life message to take from the Space Marines either, really.
No.
Like, I suppose actually, the inspiring message, is, to take from 1,000 Suns, is phone your dad more often.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Phone your dad and just do it with a normal phone.
Yeah, not a warp breaking tunnel through reality that destroys
just
your father's
phone.
machinations.
That's a good one.
I mean, searching for like positive messages in the Warhammer universe is a futile endeavor, really, which is why it's so much fun.
Yeah. I think the message of the Skaven is you can do it, but don't.
Is that surely their message is like, you could do it and you should try to do it as much as possible at any expense, including the expense of all the people you love around.
Yeah, maybe but don't was, I like editorializing on my part.
Right, yeah, an interpretation. Classic BBC bias. Skaven. They're okay, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's, I mean, I think that's, I think the positive message of the Skaven is not something that Skaven would necessarily do, but it's unionize.
Yeah, they certainly would not. I mean, I guess maybe the Necrons.
They probably should, but yeah.
Are the most unionized of all the.
All right, talking about the BBC bias. You wandered into the mind pyramid and you came out as a robot.
Yeah, look at you.
And that's why we've drifted towards the centre right. Ever since, oh God. What other factions are there?
Halflings, just make a nice stew.
Have a stew, yeah.
Have a stew.
I think, the positive message of the, Gene Stealer cults is Granddad knows best. Or, it's okay to be bald.
It's okay to be bald.
When you got a mining drill.
Don't fear Granddad's genes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just part of your new reality. Yeah, it's almost impossible to pull out any sensible ideas, but.
oh God, no. I think
we're way beyond that.
Yeah, like, Tyranids is pretty much like, just, eat what makes you happy.
Get that biomass.
Exactly.
Which is get that biomass is my new 2019 motto, actually.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
2019, I'm gonna
get Khan effects with a dad bod. Like.
Get that biomass.
Yeah.
Lemon drizzle cake, get it. It's biomass.
Yeah. All right. What else? Is there any other factions that have a positive message to share?
No.
No, there aren't. Let's do the next question. It's from Andrew, who writes, "Good morning. I recently completed my first models that I'm really happy with. Link below. Obviously, we can't project the link through our minds right now.
Might give it in the show notes.
Thank you for saying, yeah. And I've had the suggestion of varnishing them. But I don't know anything about varnishing, and every piece of advice I've seen online seems to have a horror story attached to how it can go wrong. Do you varnish your models, and how do you do it? I'd hate to damage the coat, either by damage from varnishing or from wear. I'm not planning to move them about loads, but they will be in use and not just on the shelf full time. Unrelated, I loved Chris's Cryptech. It's a shame you don't post more Necrons. Thanks a lot in advance, Andrew. I agree. I do have more Necrons to paint.
Sweet.
So I only, my voice went weird. I only varnish, metal and resin models, and that's because acrylic paint tends to bond very, very well to plastic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I used to varnish my old, Warhammer Fantasy Battle Wood Elves with hairspray. Because,
why?
because my mum said that it might help. And I was
That's why they look so lustrous.
yeah, that's why they're so beautiful and shiny. They've got that,
And they're so flammable. They're so flammable.
very, very flammable. Oh, yes.
The elf and children of the woods.
Yes, do not
'Cause
hold
they're
a match to them, for they will ignite. Yeah, so don't do that, I guess. There probably are good, like, matte fixes. I never use them.
So the new GW one, so Purity Seal was the old one, and it's not great. I use it mostly for terrain.
Right.
The new one, which I think is Munitorum Varnish. What the fuck? It's the current one.
Yeah.
Is actually pretty good in my experience. Thoughts on using it appropriately. Like most sprays, keep it in your trousers. As in warm it. So, which I do by putting it in my trouser pocket for half an hour and just go about my day. And then as soon as you forget you've got a can in your pocket, time to spray. Yeah, exactly. As soon as you can't feel cold metal, it's the same temperature as you. So, that's when you can spray. Also, shake it for fucking ages. Like normal paint, I shake for 2 minutes. Varnish, I spray for shake for 3 to 5.
By normal paint, you mean primer?
Yeah, sorry, spray primer.
Yeah.
I don't shake every paint I use for 2 minutes.
I was going to say, that's a slow process.
It's like the fucking Macarena in.
I get tired doing it. Or shaking paints.
Just shake for, it's a weird one because you don't want to spray very much and you want to shake for a really long time. So you shake for 5 minutes and then what I do is I tend to give the normal 20, 30 centimeter distance. Obviously well ventilated, not too windy. But then what I do is a spray from, a sort of quick, from every different angle around the model and then leave it. Don't be tempted to just go back and do it again and then, leave it to dry. And then if it's obvious that someone hasn't caught, then maybe go back and repeat. But other than that, it's probably fine. And then with models that are resin or metal, I just always try and pick them up by the base, if I can. And keep an eye on them because the thing that will ultimately remove paint is obviously damage is damage and you can't really get around that.
Sweat.
But sweat, oil and grease from your fingers, that can pull paint off metal models. I've never seen it happen on a plastic model.
No, same.
So don't bother varnishing plastic models, I would say.
Yeah.
But with the metal model, you just need to keep an eye on it. Whenever I find cast stuff, like my Curseling or my Herald or New Skaven Warlock, I just keep an eye on it. So if it's on I haven't had this with the Warlock yet, but if it's in use on a gaming table, and my opponent moves to pick it up, I might say, can I do that? You know what I mean? Or can you please pick it up by the base? That kind of thing. Cause,
best way to protect it.
Yeah. And usually it'll be, and actually even, Forge World resin is better even than this. So, you can be less worried about that as well. Hopefully that's helpful.
Like always, I've never seen, GW plastic properly primed chip. Yes. Yeah. In my years of returning to the hobby. As long as it's properly primed, it should be fine. Yeah.
Oh, also with fine casts and metal, you also do yourself a huge favor by actually priming it properly because GW plastic is often even fine with a regular base coat spray. So Corax White and I'm obviously talking about GW brands, but it's the same as true of other spray as well. Something isn't necessarily a primer because it's a spray. Like Chaos Black and Corax White contain primer in addition to the pigment.
Mechanica Standard Grade, does it not?
Nope.
Oh.
Nope, none of the others do. So if you are basing with them, the model isn't actually being primed, you're painting on top of paint.
Yeah.
And it's actually a testament to how well that paint bonds to the model that it's almost never a problem.
Yeah.
I almost never have a problem with it. But if, for example, I'm painting a metal model that I ultimately want to paint from a grey base coat, I will spray it white first or black first, so that it has some primer on it because that will also help. So, because
good advice.
Tips.
Top tips.
Tips day. Our final question comes from 22 for 22 questions champion, Pete/Fee from Discord.
Woo.
I'm going to cough. Now I'm going to read. Pete writes, hello, Pharaon First Step and Fabricator General Seniorus. It's been an unusual past month or so for me, having my free time mostly eaten up by escaping from Tarkov, which is a game, instead of painting and playing, so my mind is on the digital. My question for this pod is, what would be your ideal Warhammer video game? We've had some cracking licensed games and also quite a few less cracking ones recently. But do you have a wish for a game in one of GW's settings that hasn't been fulfilled yet? perhaps something exploring AOS, a 40k dating sim. Always loving the pod, Pete/Fee, and you're on Discord. Now, I think Fee and I were playing Apex Legends a little while ago, and we're discussing the Primark dating sim. So I don't want to recap that conversation, but I also badly want that to exist.
I think about this far too much. And a Dynasty Warriors version.
Good idea.
You could skin that in 40k or AOS.
AOS Dynasty Warriors sounds really
AOS
cool.
Dynasty Warriors would be super, super nice. And it doesn't have to be like as kind of out there as Dynasty Warriors is, but you could, because Dynasty Warriors is just, sort of get into games, video games specifically, but like the fidelity of that game is so far out of date, like about 15 years out of date now. And if you actually came into that concept with like a modern technology, proper modern engine, proper like fidelity, and then you played a cool Lightning Stormcast man slashing up hundreds and hundreds of FEC on a kind of dynamic war map where you have to siege objectives and then defeat heroes. That is a really good fit for melee combat, a melee combat kind of AOS game. That would be super, super nice. But a lot of these things kind of require budget to realize the sort of high fantasy aesthetic for AOS. And also 40k always struggles with this as well, where if you're going to do anything at scale, you're going to need loads of money to do it properly. And that's what's never quite been thrown at Warhammer games, with the exception of Dawn of War series and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You don't really tend to see like medium to small studios actually taking on the license.
And occasionally get something like Vermintide, which feels great. More expensive than it is.
Yeah, and it looks great as well. Vermintide 2, for example, is a great looking game that feels amazing and has fairly compelling loot system. Is just a really great co-op game. That's one of the most successful Warhammer games in recent years, easily. A few other exceptions. What's the Mechanicus one that was kind of XCOM like?
Mechanicus.
Oh, it's called Mechanicus. There you go. I enjoyed that as well. That's really nice.
Awesome. Yeah, I was thinking, I'm sure I've spoken about this before. Stop me if I have. What I would like is an AOS Battle Royale game. Because I always thought that it'd be fun to have a Battle Royale game that was far more focused on melee combat than ranged combat.
Yeah.
Like a robust melee combat system. Like a For Honor style or Absolver style melee combat system. But in a kind of, 100 player, sort of Battle Royale type map set in the realm of chaos. And my two pitches for this are either the Varanspire, which is actually where Warcry is going to be, I think.
Yeah.
Or, the Realm of Khorne. Literally I started, this is a daydream I've had of like trying to like pitch this game, and call it like Eightfold Path or something. So it's literally like the Path of Skulls in, the Realm of Khorne. And where in the fiction, your goal is to be the last person standing in these kind of blasted wastelands. Varanspire has more options for you have different kinds of Chaos Champions there, but it could just be all Khorne. And have the kind of roaming and looting and seizing blood altars and, finding like special powers and armor and stuff, but ultimately have it come down to like big scraps and stalking people through the undergrowth and, Hunger Games style sort of Battle Royale stuff.
Yeah, nice.
I think that'd be a really cool way of doing multiplayer Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, that would fit totally in the fiction as well.
Yeah.
You can get little chaos boons for wins and or skulls taken and stuff.
Yeah,
like
or like even get chaos boons over the course of a game. So
nice.
Like as you get kills, you
grow tentacle arms.
Get bigger. You just get bigger.
Yeah. And angrier.
Yeah, exactly. And redder.
That's awesome.
That'd be my one.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Skaven Tycoon. That's the other one.
Skaven Tycoon, building like a hive.
Yeah, like a Blight City sort of, yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the Republic Commando, which I always call Republican Commando, and but Republic Commando, but it's a kill team scenario, and you're ordering around your kind of Space Marine companions through cool levels.
Yeah, Deathwatch XCOM.
Nice, that'd be lovely too. Yeah. Loads. There's loads. There should be more great Warhammer video games.
To be honest, there's an upcoming, like, Warhammer Fantasy Diablo sort of thing, I think. And I kind of wish there was an Age of Sigmar Diablo thing. It seems like a better fit to me. Yeah,
I played that actually at preview, and it's very Diablo 3. And to the extent that it's like, well, why not just play Diablo 3? Yeah. It's got some more co-op functionality.
Blizzard have been freely nicking designs from Warhammer for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. You want to play those other Warhammer games that exist? The Warcraft series?
I think making like a sort of dingy old city Diablo 3-esque thing is the last thing you want to do if you're making an action RPG. You want to make it the most over the top, shiny, explosive, graphically beautiful, thing you can.
Tell you what,
AOS could do that.
I play a Devil May Cry style character action game where you play as Neve Blacktalon.
Just twin axes.
Yeah, lots of
comboing things.
riding the winds of Ferric, whatever that means.
Yeah. Grab the tail of this Griffhound. It's taking you to the next level. Checkpoint activated.
It's more like Super Mario Sunshine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Except it's a beautiful bird that takes you where you need to go.
Lovely. That is all the questions we've got. And that brings this podcast to an end. We can now all go to sleep at the Manor of Necrons. And so can you. So can everyone. If you'd like to send us a question for the next episode, you can do so by emailing us at miniatures@crateandcrowbar.com. I think. Yeah, it is that.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm pretty sure. Thank you, as ever, to everyone who backs Crate and Crowbar on Patreon, because they let us do this sort of thing. And thank you for listening. If you'd like to find Tom and I's miniatures on Instagram, that is the place where do find them. Tom?
I'm at Ludo Paints Minis on Instagram.
I am at Exit Warp, or /Exit Warp, I guess, which is EXITWARP.
Another one down.
We did it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.